The Lancaster County Board of Supervisors, August 26, 2021 meeting back to order. May we stand to pledge our allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. At this particular time, we have a work session that is proposed by the Waller Solar Project. They can make a presentation here to the board. I'm gonna say this to the board members. This is gonna sort of like be a collaboration part where we can have the question and answers as they're presenting. All right, so, and I'll say this to the public, if we have enough time left at the end of this session here, we'll open it up for a brief question and answer session from the public. Okay. All right, so at this particular time, Mr. Bryan.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you guys are aware, the utility scale solar ordinance for Lancaster County took effect July 1st. The very first applicant was Waller Solar. And given the complexity of the project, given the size of the project, county staff and the Open Road Renewables folks felt like it might be appropriate to present it to you first in this format. That way you guys have a chance to look at it rather than it being presented as a cold application for public hearing all at one time. That will give everybody a chance to look at it, understand it, and then we'll go on with the process as the board dictates. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so at this time, Craig?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Craig Adair. I'm a Senior Development Manager at Open Road Renewables. Am I getting picked up in this okay? Very much appreciate you taking the time to do this workshop. As probably some of you know, it's been a fairly long road to get to this point. I've been coming up here for a little over 3 years now, working with landowners in the area to put this Waller Solar project together and get the proposal to this point, and we're very excited to be here and appreciate the road that you've been down so far. I think Brian did an excellent job, as did your planning commission, and you, the board, in putting together a very robust ordinance, and we very much appreciated the opportunity to provide input during that process. This is a project that we are very excited about, not just because of the benefits that it can provide to the 22 landowners that are involved, but also to the county. And we're going to dig into that now, but we at Open Road are well aware that this is a big change. It's a big project, and there are a lot of different parts to it. And so I appreciate your taking the time to do this workshop. Because of this, because of the size of the change, I would propose that we do this informally, as the chair said. You're welcome to stop me at any point and ask questions. And to me, it's important that we get all the questions answered. So I'd like to introduce, I brought a few folks with me, and I'd like to introduce them. First of all, also from Open Road is Mike Volpe. Mike is a vice president at Open Road and one of the founders of the company, and has been doing solar a lot longer than I have. So happy to have him here. And we also have a few, our local counsel, Will Hubbard, is here. I think everybody knows Will. And Scott Foster is a land use attorney with Gentry Locke. And I think what we'll do is he and I will tag team this presentation, and he'll take some of the more legal aspects, and I'll take more of the project specific components. And then there's also a few subject matter experts that I invited to come without knowing specifically what your questions would be. If you want to dig deeper into some of the topics, there's a few folks here I'd like to introduce, because I'll just ask them to come up depending on what the questions are. Rick Thomas is with the Timmons Group, and the Timmons Group is sort of a full service provider. They do all of our survey work. Rick is very familiar with the permitting level at the state, which if this goes well and you approve this permit, we will have a very long and extensive process to go through at the state level, and Rick is very familiar with that. We also have Scott Wiley, who's a landscape architect at Timmons, and he's the one that did the landscaping, the preliminary landscaping plan that's in the application, so he's very familiar with the landscaping topics. Alan Christo is an engineer at the Timmons Group in the stormwater management department. So he does the modeling and puts together the erosion and sediment control plans and the stormwater management plans. And so he will be available for questions on that. And then we also have Tommy Cleveland, who's an independent solar engineer based in North Carolina, has extensive experience in solar and actually for a living commissions solar projects. And he's an expert in a number of different topics: the decommissioning process, the impacts of solar on agriculture, and various health and safety topics. So I may call on them at different points to, if you have questions that go deeper than I can answer. So with that said, what I'd like to do is turn it over to Scott Foster of Gentry Lock to handle the first couple of slides here.
Sure thing. It's great to be back with y'all. Go ahead. Ready? Mm-hmm. Thank you. So wanted to roll through the items that are before you for consideration, just from an applicant standpoint and from your all's legal review standpoint. The two things that you're going to be considering are the special exception permit, which is the permitting process that Lancaster uses for all special exception uses, and then the siting agreement, which I'm going to talk about in detail as we make our way through the presentation. The siting agreement is a relatively new process and one that really houses the business end of solar development. So, special exception criteria. These are the criteria you all use to evaluate every special exception that you approve in Lancaster. You all are familiar with these. That the location is appropriate, use is consistent with the comp plan, public health, safety, impacts, the existence of adequate utilities, and safeguards for adjacent and nearby properties. The application that we've prepared for you speaks to each of these topics in the narrative. The most important part of the application, the special exception application, are the conditions we've proposed. The conditions are supplemental and in addition to the requirements that are provided by your ordinance. I'll highlight some of the key parts of our proposed special exception conditions that speak to a lot of the topics that you all may have questions about today. So the conditions I just referenced, they really fit like a puzzle piece around your existing ordinance. Brian and the Planning Commission worked on your ordinance for a long time. I think it's a very good product. The conditions fit around them in a very neat fashion, and in certain areas provide additional rigor, additional detail about the overall impact, how the project will be sited, how adjacent properties will be protected, et cetera. Your ordinance is comprehensive as solar ordinances go. You've got regulations on point on a number of features, so I think you should move into this feeling well protected and well prepared for this application.
Next slide.
Yes, sir. I think Craig's up. We're going to talk about the broad strokes of the project.
So the Waller Solar Project, there are a total of 22 landowners involved in the project. That encompasses several different types of land agreements. Those are long-term lease agreements, those are purchase option agreements, and those are easements to run the buried electrical cable that will run the power from the solar panels over to the substation. The total proposed project area is 1,400 acres. We'll have a map here. We'll dig a little bit deeper into that. And we're expecting the project to have a capacity of 131 megawatts. That's sized based on our extensive analyses of the available capacity on the transmission line, which is what drew us to the area in the first place. And then in terms of high-level benefits to the county, you're looking at least $14 million over the 40-year life of the project. I say at least because we'll dig into this more later, but that only includes 2 of the 3 sources of revenue to the county, and we'll talk more about that later. The power is delivered to Dominion's 115 kV transmission line that runs kind of down the spine of the county. Go to the next. The project is located at the northwest end of the county. One of the parcels actually abuts the Richmond County line. It is mostly on the east side of Route 3. There's one solar field that we expect would be on the west side of Route 3, kind of nestled between Alfonso and Muskemon, and with Lara Road running right through it. The only part of the project that would be visible from Route 3, you can see the little finger along there just north of Lively, and I have another slide, we'll talk about that more, and you can see the transmission line running right through it. But I think one of the things that's unique about the project is, in terms of projects that we've done, is that it is largely in managed timber. So there's photos of a few of the different parts of the project area that you all probably know better than I do, but that most of the project area is managed timber, between 70 and 80% of it, and then about 25-30% of it is currently being farmed. This is the overall project area. In your application, we call it the conceptual layout. You can see here that in this part of the county, it's a low population density. I've circled the areas, the clusters of houses that are closest to the project, and it's basically 4 areas: the Nutsville area, the Lively area, Alfonso, and then the Lara Road community. The rest of the project, especially as you go north and east, is fairly remote, and there are very few roads and houses. Most of those solar fields will not be visible to the public at all. A sort of blessing and a curse of the project is the heavily forested nature of the project area. It means it'll be a more expensive project to build because we essentially have to convert the timberlands to farmlands before we can start construction. But the good thing is it means there's lots of natural screening, and we'll talk a little bit more about the way your ordinance works in terms of the screening. The red and black line on this map is the project boundary. That's the 1,400 acre, what we call maximum extent, the largest extent of potential land disturbance. And I'm focusing on this. There's been a little bit of confusion about the size of the project. So 1,400 acres would be the maximum area for development, or the maximum area where there could be surface equipment. The actual fenced area that will have solar panels is, for a 131 megawatt project, is a bit smaller than that. It's actually more like 1,000 to 1,100 acres. So we included in this map an indicative layout. We don't yet know exactly what the layout will be because we haven't selected panels. That happens later in the process once we've got the state level permit, but it would likely look something similar to this. So the line that's a dashed black line that has X's on it is the fence line, inside of which would be all of the surface equipment in these conceptual layout maps. Outside of the fence would only be the buried electrical cables, what we call collection lines, a few access or driveways, the landscaping, and in some cases stormwater management. Sometimes those are, the ponds are inside the fence, sometimes they're outside the fence, and we'll know that once we get to further in the design process. Another unique feature of this project area compared to many solar projects is because of the topography here and because of the number of wetlands and swamps, this project is more scattered, i.e. it will be comprised of somewhere between 15 and 18 separate non-contiguous solar fields, which means the project is more spread out. But it also means that there are lots of natural wildlife corridors that run throughout the project area. This is the northeast part of the project area where probably the largest concentration of solar fields would be, and you can see with the yellow arrows the number of gaps between the fences where wildlife would be able to continue to move unimpeded. So these are a couple of the features of your ordinance that impact the design, the setbacks and the screening. And the setbacks, which are measured from the property line to the fence, are 50 feet from adjoining agricultural parcels and 100 feet from residential parcels. And then from any public road, the setback from the edge of the right-of-way to the fence is 75 feet. You added a significantly larger buffer for several corridors of significance, including Route 3, which is the only one that affects our project, and that's 250 feet. Keep in mind that setback is from the the edge of the right-of-way or the property line to the fence. The actual panels will be even further away because we have to leave a gap between the panels and the fence to be able to get between them. The other feature that is unique in terms of solar ordinances that we've dealt with is the way you designed the vegetative buffer. It has a 40-foot vegetated buffer around the entire perimeter of the project. Most counties only require a buffer a certain distance from homes or roads, i.e. where someone would see it. You included a buffer around the entire perimeter, but it's very customized, which I think it makes it workable from our perspective. There are three types of buffers. There's the planted buffer, which would be the 4 rows of a mix of trees and shrubs, and that we've got depicted over here in the diagram to the right. And then existing trees where it's functionally equivalent to the planted buffer. And then the particularly unique feature that your Planning Commission came up with is the idea of a natural buffer. Any place that's more than 1,000 feet away from a home to just simply quit mowing and let the vegetation naturally regenerate. And you can see in the landscaping plan, which is in the application packet, where if we were building the project today, where we expect we would have each of those different types of buffers. And the vast majority of it, because of the forested nature of the area, is existing vegetation. I think about 10% of the perimeter would have the landscape buffer. Now, keep in mind, that's a preliminary plan because most of this area is, the landowners own it and are managing the timber. So, for example, someplace where we showed on their existing trees as a buffer, if the landowner removes those trees, well, then we would be required to plant a buffer. And when we submit the final landscape plan along with our site plan, Brian will get a chance to look it over and approve it and make sure it meets the requirements. The planted buffer, given the specs that you included in your ordinance of a 4-foot minimum height for trees and a 12-inch minimum height for shrubs, should, under normal growing conditions, largely obscure the equipment somewhere between 5 and 7 years after planting around the end of construction. And then I've got, if we go to the next slide, a couple of images that I think may be helpful. So this is a photo taken along Route 3, which I know is one of the sensitive areas in the project because of the volume of traffic along Route 3. You can see in the lower left-hand corner, the top-down view, the 250-foot setback between the road and the closest part of the fence. And then in the large picture above, that's a photo of the location. Pay no mind to the sign there. This was not intended to be free advertising for somebody who sells bail bonds. But the images, the objects behind in the background, the panels and the trees are a simulation. So that's a computer simulation to give you an idea of how the planted buffer will look at different points in time. So if we plant trees at 4 feet and shrubs at 12 inches, the 4-row buffer, Scott's team put together this simulation that shows what the buffer would look like within a year or two after planting. And if you go to the next slide, this is what it would look like, again, under normal growing conditions. That some of that, of course, are variables, but that under normal growing conditions within 6 or 7 years, maybe 5 if there's a lot of rain and conditions are good. This shows vegetation, what it would look like, and you can see, it's hard to tell from this distance, but that if you zoom in on this photo, you could see that there's just a few spots scattered through there where you could see the blue of the solar panels. Yeah, and feel free to interrupt me if you have questions or comments, but otherwise I'm going to just keep going. Okay, next. Decommissioning. This is a big topic and probably the first or the second question that I get when I sit down at a landowner's kitchen table is, well, what's going to happen at the end of this project? And it's one of the first questions your Planning Commission asked in drafting the ordinance. The life of a solar panel is considered to be 30 to 40 years. They are guaranteed by the manufacturer for at least 25 years. Increasingly, the market standard is now often 30 years. So our lease agreements run out 40 years. So the project life is up to 40 years. Your ordinance, as well as state law, require these things that are listed here. That we have to provide a decommissioning plan that's approved by the zoning administrator prior to the start of construction, that requires the removal of the equipment, restoration of the land to substantially the condition prior to the project being built, and ours will have an emphasis on reuse and recycling. We included in the application a preliminary decommissioning plan. It's preliminary because we haven't yet selected a panel, so we can't run all of the numbers, but we wanted you to have an idea of what will be included in that plan. And the other key component that I'm sure you'll be interested in is the financial surety, which is required under state law and under your ordinance. Yeah.
It is possible that people will be replacing these panels individually if something happens to the panel. Is that correct?
Yeah.
It's not going to wait 40 years. What happens to a panel that gets replaced? You talk about reusing and recycling.
Mm-hmm.
Everything I've read said recycling doesn't make any economic sense. It takes too much to get the materials out. It's not worth it. And so developed countries, as I understand it, will sell used panels to underdeveloped countries. Is that correct? Is that where the reuse comes in from you?
Well, reuse, I think it depends, for example, what the scenario is. If in 10 years or there was a drastic improvement in technology and we or the operator wanted to go in and replace some panels, well, those panels would still be new enough and be, have efficient enough that they could be reused. Somebody would buy them and put them on a different project, perhaps here or another country. The recycling, I think, is maybe the part that you're asking about. When the panel really no longer has market value and nobody's going to put it on another project, well, that comes down to the question then of the cost to salvage the materials that are still reusable, the glass, the metals, the materials and the semiconductor chips. And for example, First Solar is a leading American manufacturer of solar panels. They take back 100% of their panels and they recycle. That's the technology that's called thin film. And the material that's used in the semiconductor is cadmium telluride. They take back 100% of their panels and then they go through a multi-stage recycling process to extract the glass and the cadmium telluride to reuse it in panels that they manufacture. And they recover 90% of the materials and reuse those materials in new panels. Now, every manufacturer is a little bit different. Not all the players are good players like First Solar is and have a producer take-back program. To be frank, that is something that honestly I don't think the industry has done a good job of getting our head around, because with the number of new projects that are expected to come online, this year, next year, 5 years, 10 years, because the cost of producing solar energy has come down so much, many companies and utilities and states are pushing solar because it's just the cheapest source of electricity. And so I think we as an industry do need to do a better job of getting our head around the volume of material that's going to be produced as these things start to come offline, more likely in the 25 to 35 or 40 year time frame. But I think it's a real issue that I hope other producers will do the same thing that First Solar is doing. But a lot of them are produced in Asia and not as don't have the same sort of policies.
So what happens if we have a tornado or hailstorm and multiple panels are damaged? First Solar is going to take them all back and replace them with something else at their cost?
First Solar does, but we don't know yet what panel we would be using. So let's say in that scenario, it's not a First Solar panel. The first thing that would happen, if there were a tornado that were to strike directly in the project, it will likely damage panels. And it can,
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment.
yeah, and it will make a big mess. But we would use, or the operator would use, the insurance proceeds to pick up the damaged panels, to remove them, to make any repairs and put new panels on. And then the panels that were damaged, the EPA classifies them as non-hazardous.
That's not true, I don't believe. It
Yeah.
may be true as far as that goes, but everything I've read said because of the cadmium in there and other materials, it actually is hazardous waste. It's a lot easier to say it's not, because then you just dump it in a landfill. But the truth of the matter is rainwater will run all that material out into the ground or the groundwater, and so it is hazardous. I can't speak for the EPA, but
Well, I can tell you how the EPA regulates them. They pass the EPA's hazardous waste test. It's called the Toxic Characteristic Leaching Procedure. And the EPA oversees these tests, and in order to be classified as non-hazardous waste, as the solar panels are, which means they could be disposed of in a landfill. That's not the solution that we recommend or that we hope will happen. But because they've run the tests, where they've been chopped up in little pieces, put acid on them, run them through tests, and there is no leaching, or the leaching is so small that it does not result in contaminations that exceed federal standards, then they are classified as non-hazardous. And Tommy, I don't know if you want to...
is that across the board, every solar panel, no matter who made it? If
No,
it's
it's
made in China or somewhere else, that's all okay, fine too?
I think it's a panel-by-panel designation, but actually, let me let Tommy, that's...
I can address this some. My name's Tommy Cleveland, and this is a topic I've studied for a number of years, or part of the topics I've studied for a number of years on what are the impacts of solar projects. And I would say, in general, you're both right. The way Craig is describing this, it is a make and model specific test. So every time every different manufacturer comes out with a new panel, new model, it'll be tested by a private lab, but to this EPA test, and see if it passes the toxic characteristic leaching procedure test to determine if it's considered hazardous or not. And there's been a fair bit of academic research on this question of, well, are used solar panels toxic? Do they pass this test? Going back more than 10 years. And that research is showing the vast majority of panels on the market today pass the test.
Yeah, but hold the phone. That's all
Yes, sir.
well and good. But what I would want to know is that every panel that would go on this site is one of those panels that's okay. And you're not guaranteeing that because you haven't bought them yet. You haven't even said where you're going to buy them. And then we're not talking about just the initial placement of the panels, but the replacement panels when 25% of them need to be replaced for whatever reason. Where are you buying those? Are those the same kind? Can we write that in our ordinance, that they have to be those
I
kinds
can
of panels?
explain a little bit of how the rules work. Craig may have some more response, but if a panel were to fail that test, then you would be required to send it to a hazardous waste landfill. So that's not a rule specific to solar, that's just a rule that applies to any
Yeah, but who's
commercial
going to pay
industry.
for that?
Well, the project will be responsible for it. And it's
Is
expensive.
that in writing?
It's more expensive than a regular landfill, but it's still not all that expensive relative to the,
But it won't
cost
be
of
the
the-
county that's on the hook for that. It will be you guys.
that's
And
correct.
that's going to be in writing somewhere.
Yeah, no, that would be on the project, and of course, we will have a very extensive insurance policy. So the first thing that will happen is we will file a claim with the insurance company. That will be on the project to cover those costs. It's a fair point, Mr. Westbrook. I would be fine with adding a condition to our permit that says these have to be Tier 1 permits, and they have to pass the EPA test. The vast majority of the panels are that, but your concern is, well, what's to keep you from going out and choosing some cheaper panel that doesn't? And I would be fine committing to having that as a permit condition.
Thank you.
Let me ask this question. What is you all's experience in handling panels? Have you had any experience in handling damaged panels and having to replace them from storms? Have you had any experience at all?
My company has not, but keep in mind, we're a developer, so we don't operate solar projects. We put the projects together, get the permits, and then a larger energy company will eventually acquire it from us and own it and operate it in the long term. But that said, there are lots of companies. At this point, there are solar projects all over the country, and there have been a number of incidents where a hurricane has hit solar projects, tornadoes have hit. In fact, you might be interested to read about a project out in California where a tornado hit the project back in 2015. It had the thin film solar panels. It damaged a lot of panels. I think it was on the order of 130-something thousand panels were damaged and had to be removed. But they also went out, BLM and Virginia Tech went out and took soil samples and then tested the soil samples, and there was no leaching of cadmium telluride into the soil. So my company specifically doesn't have examples, but I think there are examples out there, and if you'd like, I'd be happy to go, dig up some research on that.
Well, I guess, you answering questions about what's gonna happen to the panels, disposing of them, but really you don't have any experience you're not part of that process. When that process happened, you're not part of that process.
No, we're not part of that process, but I don't think there are many solar companies here today that could be in front of you that would have that experience, because the life of them are at least 25 years and
Well,
likely 35 or 40. So there just haven't been very many that have been decommissioned yet.
Yeah, well, I'm not talking about, the 35 years, I'm just talking mainly about ones that gets damaged or got replaced for something, but that's not part of you all's, process.
That's
You're not
right.
in that.
That's right.
Before we go any further, board members, what Mr. Adair said about putting in the writing, he stated again about what you'd be ready to do or agreeable to do and putting in writing about panels.
Yeah, so to Mr. Westbrook's concern, I would be willing to include a permit, a condition in our permit that says that the panels must be, what's the phrase? Tier 1 manufactured panels, and then, yeah, that pass the EPA, it's called, the acronym is TCLP, pass the EPA's TCLP test, which means they're classified as non-hazardous.
All right, gentlemen, you've heard that. Now, are we in an
Well,
agreement that we
let
should
me
have
ask this
that
question.
done?
Let me ask this question about that. So these guys are gone. So we got that in writing. So is it our staff now that's gotta ensure that these panels gonna be replaced? I'm talking about damaged ones now. I'm not talking 35 years from now. I'm talking about something happens in the next 10 years or whatever. Is it our staff responsibility now to make sure that these tier 1 panels is being put in by whatever company is in charge?
All right,
Who's overseeing that part?
all right, go ahead and put that statement in there. Go ahead and put that statement in there. Now, answer that question. Now, let's say you said you done sold that to whoever. All right, isn't that part of the agreement that they,
Oh, yeah, the permit will be binding on anybody who owns the project. The permit will be with Waller Solar One LLC. So it doesn't matter, we own Waller Solar One LLC today, but if 10 years from now, somebody else owns it, the permit is with Waller Solar One. That permit and all the conditions, and same with the siting agreement, those are contracts effectively that are binding on the counterparty to the contract. Did I say that right? Okay.
okay,
And staff's responsibility would be to make sure that the conditions are adhered to, and if they were not adhered to, we would ask the operator to fix it.
Yeah,
So-
that's what I'm getting to, you.
okay, all right.
Mr. Larson has extensive experience with, I believe, with surety bonds. And I'm concerned, based on what I believe I know, which is a big question mark, that the amount of money has to be renewed every so many years. You get that through an insurance company, and it's only good for 5 years, and we have to remember to require it to be renewed. It isn't an automatic thing. One of my chief concerns is that this is all good talk, but we're talking about what's best for the entire county here. And is the county gonna be on the hook for major money when something wrong happens? Either now, 10 years, or 40 years. And so I'm concerned about everything that has to do with money, number one, and I'm concerned about the toxic nature of it. You assured me of some of that. I'll have more research to do on that, because I just read an article from, I'm sure you know Michael Schellenberger. Yeah, and it was written last month, 2 months ago, June 20th, I believe. And he's very concerned about the toxic nature, and he's saying that the cadmium can be, and lead, can be washed out of the damaged panel by rainwater. Well, you've already talked about how much water there is around this, the wetlands and swamps and whatnot, so there you go. So your assurance is one thing, and what I've read is something else again. And he didn't make this stuff up. It's from research from solar people and other people. So somehow there's a disconnect. So on the one hand is the economy, the economics of all this, what it's really going to cost us down the road, and the other is the concern about the toxicity.
Well, they're very important concerns, and I'm not at all trying to minimize them, and particularly the decommissioning requirements and the decommissioning bond or whatever type of surety. It is very important. I share your concern. It's very important that be in place, that it be valid at all times so that you and the landowners are protected. Now, keep in mind, this will be a 130 megawatt project, will be somewhere on the order of $150 million facility. And we will have a contract to sell power to someone. And the very first thing that will happen is that we are financially incentivized, or whoever owns the project is heavily financially incentivized to keep those panels producing electricity at all times. And so if anything happens to take any of the panels offline, we're losing money, and we are financially incentivized to get it up and running as quickly as possible. I know that doesn't answer your concern that if we go bankrupt or something happens and economically it doesn't make sense, well, that's the reason for the bond. But it's a requirement of state law, it's a requirement of your ordinance, and I would be happy to work with you to make sure that the bond is valid at all times, whatever form that is. So I think it's a valid concern, and I think the law and your ordinance are protective, but if there's things that we need to do to make it bulletproof, I'm certainly open to that. I would like to address, and I think it's, Michael Schellenberger is somebody that's out there and he's writing, but I think what you should know about his claims about toxic waste in solar panels is that he is a paid advocate for the nuclear industry. That's documented, so I think you have to take what he's saying in that light. He would have you believe that if I came to you and asked you, do you want to store this solar panel in your backyard, or do you want to store a spent nuclear rod in your backyard?
That's cheap, that's cheap. I know about his thing. I know he favors nuclear. I know that. I don't know he's paid, but that's a poor comparison. Yeah, I want to store.
Well, but I mean,
nuclear
he claims that solar is more hazardous than spent nuclear fuel, and
That's
I just
right.
personally don't find that really a credible claim.
All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
if I may, Dr. Westbrook mentioned my experience with respect to surety bonds. And that experience is based on when I was a planning and land use director from the years 2000 to 2007. Also during that period of time, and I'll get to that later when you get to that section, but I directed or finished the first comprehensive plan that the county had. It was driven by a state requirement. We developed a long, arduous process. I was also involved in a review of that document. But more to the point, the surety bonds dealt with subdivisions that have been created in this county. The subdivisions, lots were sold off before roads were completed. And the surety bonds were for the purpose of completing those roads, paving them, bringing up to state standards. A couple of problems happened along the way. We had to keep a book of those. And the way that they were actually created is that many of them were nothing more than insurance policies. It simply said that if, if these roads aren't completed, for example, then that money's there to let the county go ahead and do it. Well, certainly the county's not set up to do that sort of thing in the first place, so that would be a last resort. But the problem comes with the fact that as inflation occurs, it's very difficult to come to terms with how much more money needs to be in that bond, number one. And the second thing was the state standards during my period of time kept getting incredibly more stringent. So the cost of building those roads went up, almost astronomically. I had the same concern with you at the final one, and the one where I think, what Dr. Westbrook's talking about, and where I have a concern, is that when you buy these insurance policies, if you will, or take out a bond, however, they're only good for a period of time, and they have an end date. Well, we had to keep a book that tracked that. And the idea was the people who were giving us those surety bonds were supposed to renew those before the old ones expired. First day of my job, I was told, don't you dare let these things expire, because if you do, that means that they're null and void. You can't, you have no leverage at that point in time to get them renewed. Well, you take the planning and land use director, and by the way, Mr. Gill and Mr. Barnes are my respective successors. You got things going every day, and yet you've got to stay on top of that. And I can tell you, in my 7 years, I can count on one hand the number of times that I received a renewed surety bond without going to the person themselves and saying, where is it? Where is it? Not once, not twice, but many times, 3, 4, 5 times. And it was time consuming. We approved a project a couple of years ago, a small one, down in the Whitestone area down there. I argued that we should have a deposit, and that deposit should be increased, say every year, every 2 years for inflation. It also should be looked at in terms of the, other factors that were driving the cost up. I would hope that you all think of that, because I will again bring it up, and at least for my part, I will say it's an important consideration, because I can tell you it was a very, very difficult thing, and I came very close to letting some of those slip because I get caught up in something else. And more often than not, the only way I could get them renewed was to tell the people after about the third or fourth phone call, either you have it to me the day before you have a renewal, the day before it elapses, or I'm going to call it. Now that got their attention, but it shouldn't come to that. So I want you to know that and take it on board with respect to your application.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's a perfectly valid concern, both in terms of the importance of making sure that the amount stays up with the changing costs, inflation, changing removal costs, labor. The way your formula works for determining the security is that the removal and restoration costs, you determine those, and then you subtract the value of the materials, whether it's the modules or the raw materials. Those all change over time. And the reason why your ordinance and why the state law says they have to be updated every 5 years is precisely to make sure that that cost is staying current. The value of the modules will absolutely go down over time. The removal costs will probably go up to some degree, and raw materials are a commodities market, but your ordinance is designed to capture all those factors, and that it has to be updated at least every 5 years. I think you're also raising an important point about enforcement. It's one thing to say that you're going to have a bond that covers these things, but then if it lapses or expires, how will Brian know, or whoever's in his position? And I think that's if there are things that we can do to,
There's no reason we can't be creative in a conditional use permit, a special exception permit condition regarding the observation and of all the bonds, and ensuring that they are regularly updated in a way that hopefully would take some of that burden off of you all. I haven't done that yet, but I'm sure that's something we can come up with.
I asked you to think about it, and I also asked you to think that 5 years is probably too long, given the concerns. And also, I read the Schellenberger articles too, and where they talk in there, they're projecting, and again, it's a matter of opinion. We're looking into the future, so I recognize that. But at the same time, the cost and that bond is for decommissioning primarily. You
Correct.
also have the other issues with damage, but in the future, it could very well be that the cost of decommissioning just skyrocket because, landfill space runs out, there are other issues that come up, so on and so forth. So
Right.
I think 5 years is probably too long, and it certainly needs to be less.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'll make a comment. Couldn't this requirement of having this bond and maintaining it be a requirement that's put into the special exception?
Yeah,
And then if they
that's-
didn't do it, we could yank the special exception and have them take the field out?
That's correct, and to some degree, that's already in there. It's a condition of the permit. But I guess we can be more specific with regards to the maintenance of the surety and provide some additional terms in that regard. As you all know, these companies carry these bonds on their balance sheet as a liability. So, if we've got a operator who has multiple projects you know, you're carrying a $15 or $20 million bond on your balance sheet across 30 or 40 projects, that becomes untenable from a financial perspective.
And that's the leverage.
Right.
And I'm sure you appreciate the fact,
Right.
you guys may be the greatest guys in the world, but you may not be here 24 years from now,
Exactly.
or whenever it is.
Right.
And if you don't have leverage in the enforcement area, you have nothing.
Agreed.
And that's what you're talking about, is the leverage.
It's my understanding that you guys said you were developers and that this project would be sold at the completion of it to another entity. Let's be realistic. The other entity would be Dominion because they're the ones that buy generation power.
That is the odds. That is the odds.
And given the resources of Dominion and their clout, I would seriously doubt that they would not be able to manage a security bond or keep it up to date.
It's thanks to all of us sitting in this room. We're all ratepayers.
Yeah, it's the same Dominion that was gonna put the towers across the river too.
Well, we'll be sure that the conditions are watertight so that they're held to they or any subsequent purchaser are held to the standards that we agree to.
And in my opinion, there should be no burden on the county staff except to oversee, but not, that's it.
Correct.
That's
Correct.
it.
And as you know, I think it's Exhibit 12 in your big packet we dropped off. We are agreeing to defray any cost to the county up to, I believe, a limit of $30,000 during the construction phase. So maybe we can come up with something similar to that for the observation and monitoring of the bond situation. Do you all have any more questions on decommissioning? We're happy to come back to it at the end too.
All right.
All right, Don.
Knock
Give me
it.
a clicker. Thanks. So, I spent a lot of time with your comprehensive plan, both your existing and draft, and the chapters that you've been updating and adopting over the last several months. As you all know, comprehensive plan is your broad guiding document for the future of the jurisdiction. They are not designed to anticipate every future land use. There are a number of land uses in existence today in Lancaster that aren't specifically mentioned in your comprehensive plan. It's supposed to be a broad document that can capture a variety. The language of your existing comp plan and those chapters, those updated chapters that you've adopted, they, albeit indirectly, do speak to this type of land use. And based on our analysis, we feel this use is compatible with your comprehensive plan. So, pursuant to 15.2.22.32, when reviewing a project like this, you guys are supposed to evaluate its location, character, and extent for conformity with the plan. So as a result, we've broken out our analysis that way. So from a location perspective, as Craig pointed out in the map and the map that you have all reviewed, this is in a pretty low residential density area. It's by and large removed from single-family neighborhoods and homes, and those that are nearby, we're going to provide robust setbacks and screening. With regards to character, relative to a lot of potential land uses, if it's well screened, solar is a great neighbor. Once constructed, it doesn't make noise. There are no smells. It's really a passive use. It's very nice. So also there relative to uses on the ground today, solar, once constructed, is a less intrusive and less impactful use. And you think about, you all are often you consider where you're going to develop additional residential properties and the potential impact of agriculture on them, and then someone not wanting agricultural ongoing. Solar doesn't even have those type of activities. So it well screened can be a good neighbor. And as your ordinance provides, setback, screening, noise, light restrictions, et cetera, your ordinance is protecting those adjacent uses as well. And we've been all talking about a 40-year time horizon here. Solar is a temporary use. Unlike so many other uses, you can pull this stuff out of the ground and it goes back a lot of times in a better and remediated form. The ground, the soils, et cetera, go back in a better remediated form than at the outset of the use. Extent, they've designed this project so it's not all in one location, not all concentrated with very few neighbors. It's spread out so that the impact is more even across that general area. And it's also been designed to avoid sensitive environmental features, wetlands, bodies of water, et cetera.
Can you, excuse me, can
Sure.
you provide relevant data about the lack of toxicity that you've claimed? I mean, I keep going back to Schellenberger because that's what I know. That's what I read. I don't have a reason to doubt him. He cited the research for that. So I'd like to see the other side of that if you have it and can get it to me. Not right now, obviously, not immediately. But
Absolutely. I just reviewed the Virginia Tech microfilm study the other day, so you know this much more.
I can offer a couple, just describe a couple of research reports, and we could get them to you, but there's a International Energy Agency. They have a group that focuses on photovoltaics. There's an international
are you
research
talking about
body.
IRENA?
No, it's IEA, and then the solar specific part of that is PVSP, I believe. They've done a number of studies on impacts, and it's a, as I say, international group of scientists from around both the US and Europe, I guess a few in Asia. And they've studied these questions of toxic leaching. They've got one large study on broken panels in place and rainwater, and they look at what is the worst case scenario. They imagine some fraction of those panels being broken and saying, what if you had these rain events and everything that could possibly wash out based on tests that have been done were all to go to one neighbor's well, and that neighbor's well was something really close, like 50 feet away. They drink out of this well for their whole lifetime. You know, that worst case scenario, is there any possibility for health impact? And their conclusion was it's not even close to a potential impact.
So your position is that Schellenberger's articles leave out an awful lot of information.
He's very selective. I've read those as well. I haven't studied them closely, but I've read them recently. Yes, I would say he's very selective and maybe even dishonest in the way he presents the data. Not that he's making things up, but he's presenting it to seem a lot more scary than in actual fact.
That's definitely
Can I
scary.
make a comment?
Yes.
I think this boils down to basically science versus research. Science is a process of where you go about studying something and writing it up about, it's a really driven toward a specific what you're trying to figure out. Whereas research, I can have any idea I want, and then I can go out and cherry pick science to what I want my research to be, to fit. So there's a big difference between research and actual science. So I think that's a little bit of the distinction between someone like Schellenberger and then the EPA. The EPA relies on scientific data that comes to them, and then they make a decision based on that data. Someone like Schellenberger is a researcher or a journalist, and they go out and they have an idea about what they want to prove. In this case, you're right, he has ties to the nuclear industry. He's also an anti-climate person, so he doesn't believe in climate change or anything in regards to that.
He doesn't say that.
So,
It's
not
true.
particularly in that order, you do some more research about him. But that's the thing about someone like Schellenberger, he's a research person, so he's not really, he's picking the science that he wants to fit his opinions versus science, which is done very much differently.
Okay.
Mr.
regardless of all
Chairman,
of that,
Yes.
You're gonna get that information
Yeah,
to
they're
us.
very well done studies, and
That's what I was gonna say, just let them get the information
Yeah.
and send it to us.
So these three chapters we called out as being particularly germane to this land use. Chapter 2 talks about preserving farmland and protecting areas. So this is essentially a highly productive land bank for 40 years. We're tying up this property in a way that can be, so it will be able to be reused at some point in the future. You don't get that with other types of development. You certainly don't get that with residential development. That is a one-way trip. This is a use that preserves land for future uses. That's been an objective for rural Virginia for a long time through the conservation easement process. Here, you're essentially holding this land in trust for future use and development. This one is I think, is particularly impactful. Solar, particularly if it's located on a small area of an active farmer's land, provides regular, stable income to an industry where that is not always guaranteed. So I really like that part about solar, because it can be a cash infusion, much like one of the farming spouses going to work as they've done for the last 100 years, so that they could carry a regular income and insurance. I think solar has the opportunity for Virginia's agricultural community, if placed correctly on specific parcels, to provide that income shot in the arm that the agricultural industry needs. And I think that's absolutely in keeping with Chapter 2 of the comp plan. Protection of potable water. Once we satisfy Dr. Westbrook about the contents of these panels, you're not gonna find much better land use from lack of foreign substances being put on the ground over a 40-year period. So, relative to agricultural, relative to residential, relative to just about any other land use, we're agreeing not to put anything at all on this land for that period of time. And I think that's a great bonus for solar.
I'm going to have to make a comment to that, because I'm going to have to agree with that, because when you talk about the Chesapeake Bay Act and the amount of development that took place along the waterfront, along waterfront lots that were once farmland mostly, and now you look at the quality of water, it's precipitously declined, and it's one reason it's because of septic fields leaching into the bay and the tributaries around it. And so tying it up in something that is low impact like this is of much less impact than, say, 100 homes.
Agreed. And then last, Chapter 6, land use and the economy. Where this project is sited, and this is different than a lot of the projects I'm working on, it's outside areas that you all hold dear for other future uses that may be beneficial to the county. So we're not tying up land that has an otherwise high value. We'll expand your county's tax base. We'll talk about that in detail on the next slide. And as I've pointed out, it will boost farmers' income and create a significant amount of construction jobs and a few long-term maintenance and operations type jobs.
Before you go on, ma'am?
Sure.
I indicated earlier my experience with the comprehensive plan. You have said that it is a guide, a general guide.
Correct.
The real issue is, to what degree do you stretch that as a guide? To what degree do you say it's just a guide, it's not hard and fast, and so on and so forth? That's the real issue. I have read the detail you put in here, where you talk about the argument saying it's substantially in compliance. And all I'll say to that is that I've had more than one lawyer say to me that they can argue a law such as Section 15.2 blumpty-blump either way. Same lawyer, Will back there could argue it the way I see it if I wanted him to. Jim could argue it the way I see it.
Right.
So, I'm not buying that, okay? And more than that, it troubles me that we went ahead and took two of the areas, A1 and A2 zoning areas, and we allowed this in there as a by right, albeit with special exception, but as by right, when it's totally inconsistent with the preamble and the intent of those two particular zoning areas, which are very specific and are actually enforced very specifically. Now, I hear the argument, I ought to be able to do what I want with my land, okay? And in a perfect world, I believe that to be true. And I too like to be not restricted to the nth degree. But I also recognize that what I do affects the people around me, either near term or long term. And in this world, you have to have zoning ordinances. And my perception, and I have another saying, a person's perception is their reality. My perception is that we've moved way too fast in those areas. We've, in effect, emasculated the comprehensive plan and those zoning ordinances. And if I didn't learn anything in my 7 years as a land use administrator, as a zoning officer, the one thing I learned is that being consistent is the most important thing. And I see this as the ultimate inconsistency. And so when I speak out regarding your project, it's more than just you. It's not just you folks, because I'll treat anyone for the remaining time on the board coming before us the same way I would treat you. And I would tell you that I can't support this. I can't support your project because of the way that we've done the comprehensive plan and those zoning ordinances, okay? And like I say, I know you probably paid a fair amount of money to get this argument here, but once again, if you, I could get Jim to argue this, you know, my way of it.
Completely understood, but the point you made, I want to tease out, that any land use should be evaluated for its effect on its adjacent properties, and that's the purpose for zoning, which is the reason we're going through this exercise right now, and the reason we have the conditions we proposed, the reasons we're ensuring to comply and in certain cases exceed your ordinance as with regards to buffering and setback. So I completely agree with the purpose of zoning. The purpose of planning is to protect adjacent uses and protect adjacent landowners, and I believe, and independent of my status as an attorney, I believe this project meets that standard.
Well, I'll give you another example, okay? I know that you guys have put a lot of stuff forward here saying how you're gonna go about doing it, and how these protections you're gonna have, and how you're not gonna affect the joint property owners. But I was also erosion and sediment control officer, Mr. Barnes' duty, before him, Mr. Gill. And I can tell you, just in the construction of something like this, you're gonna have guys out there working. Friday's gonna roll around. Everybody wants to get out of here and go home, wherever they came from. Nobody's gonna go out and check the silt fences, which probably haven't been checked in multiple weeks. And then we're gonna get a big storm burst come in. Those silt fences will overflow. They'll find their way into some stream, which may even be intermittent, may not actually be there until the storm, and then they'll find their way into tidal waters, carrying with it sediment, pollutants, and everything else. That's gonna happen. I'm sure as I'm sitting right here, I know it will happen. And that will then affect everybody who has an interest in tidal waters.
So part I can deal with.
That's just one example.
No, and I hear you. The part I can deal with is what we put in the conditions, and existing state law and existing local practice with regards to erosion sediment control. There are folks here who know ENS inside and out. I think one guy even walked in with the ENS handbook in his hand. So if you have specific ENS questions or ways to avoid the situation you've described, he's your man.
Okay, well, just so you know too, I read the commentary. I don't remember whether it's great, you wrote it or somebody else wrote the commentary in the Rappahannock record a couple of weeks ago. And I went through and looked at all the verbs, the action verbs. There were way too many. It gave you wiggle room, okay? And I'm sure your lawyer advised you to do that. It's because these kinds of situations occur. So you even yourself recognize that that may be the case when you say what we're doing will mostly keep this from happening, or words along that line. You see what I'm saying?
I do, and that's where Mr. Cornwell and I are going to work together to make sure these conditions are.
When you come before us the next time, I'll have that article and I'll just underline it.
Well,
I'll even show
I
it to
didn't
you.
see that one until I saw it in the paper. I'll tell you that. So.
Because there's not many words there. They're unequivocal.
Understood. Let's go to the fun part. The next slide.
Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Because you got here, will create jobs. So I'm pretty sure you're gonna have to bring some people in that's knowledgeable
Yes.
how to do this. So what is your local hiring practice gonna be?
So Craig can answer that better than I. Thanks.
Yeah, the reality is, we would love to hire as many people locally as we can. In practice, it will depend on how many folks have the skills, who are available. The construction period is anywhere from 10 to 15 months. So it's relatively short term. But it's in our best interest, it's cheaper for us to hire locally, but it just depends. I don't yet have a good idea of the skills match and the availability. You know, we typically have a job fair locally and advertise locally to get as many local folks who are interested and want to participate and work in construction. As you'll see, I think on the next slide, we did an analysis, and it looks like there will be about 140 people employed. That number will ebb and flow. At a project of this size, there will be probably at the high level 250 people working on site. But on average over a year, it would be about 140 jobs that will be created to build the project. Once the project is done, it's a much smaller number. It's, you know, an electrical technician, a security person, grounds maintenance, so 4 jobs or so. But you know, we would be committed to hiring as many folks locally as possible, but we just don't know the skills match and how much availability there will be in terms of then how many of those jobs will be filled locally.
May I ask another question?
Yes.
Are you planning on having a battery bank or more than one battery bank associated with this?
We don't have any plans to include battery storage in this project.
Is it possible that they'll come along later because whoever you sell this to is gonna think that's a good idea?
I think it's
or
possible.
necessary?
Yeah.
Are they safe completely? Wasn't there just a fire here recently in an adjoining county or close by? And that was a real hazard for them?
Batteries, it's really a different proposal, and I don't have much familiarity with batteries. There are other folks at my company that do. I think the fire incidents are rare. I think the ones that happen get a lot of news coverage.
Okay, but if we approve this, are we approving everything in the future that might happen with this?
You would have to come back and amend the special exception to add energy storage to this site. I've permitted what we call co-located energy storage with solar, and that was a cup, was specific to include energy storage as a use. Absent that inclusion, they'd have to be back before you all to get that permission.
I have a quick question. In regards to that too, that would require another siting agreement, correct?
It very well could. It very well could.
Because
The taxation of co-located storage and solar is tricky, but it very well may require another siting agreement.
It certainly would increase the megawatts and therefore would trigger the additional revenue sources.
It could potentially increase the megawatts. Usually, additional storage capacity associated with the facility, you actually keep the same megawatt production of the facility. It's just spread on the line over a longer period of the day. But I have not yet added energy storage to an existing solar facility, so that I'm sure will be coming down the line. The other thing, to Mr. Lee's question, and this is an indirect answer, but the Solar Trade Association of Virginia started a program at Southside Community College to train folks to install solar facilities. That has been a success, and they're working to expand that to other community college systems. That's not a direct answer, and I can't say it's going to be on the Northern Neck anytime soon, but that process of educating more people who are skilled to meet the demand for these jobs is underway, and you know, it's my hope that they expand that program. So,
Does that program last for 10 to 15 months? So that by the time the student's ready, the construction's over?
no, so I'm not sure of the timeline of the program. It's called Shine.
It's unfair.
All right, here's sure.
One more, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but your bullet up there that says avoid sensitive environmental features. Y'all have been in the area, you said 3 years, long enough to see that just about no matter where you go in this county, it's a very short distance to tidal waters. You
Got
got,
it.
you know, creeks, we call them, coming up there, so on and so forth. My question for you would be, when we have these rainstorms that come in and dump 2 to 3, 4, 5, sometimes even more inches of rain, you have things that all of a sudden become streams. If it's a low area, it
Right.
becomes a stream flowing into that. Have you taken those into account?
So-
Where, you know, in other words, these are streams that are what we would call intermittent.
Intermittent
They only occur when you have rainfall, otherwise they're dry. But I mean, those are sensitive.
Right. So the short answer is yes, and the Timmons folks are the ones who have essentially endorsed the potential location of the panel array, and it does account for that as, subject to a wetlands delineation. So,
Thank you.
Can I just add that you probably saw there's a map in your packet that shows all the environmental features, the wetlands, the floodplains, the RPAs. The project is designed to avoid those areas completely. Rick is an expert. If you're interested to know, he can tell you all you want to know about the different types of wetlands and all the different surveys that went into determining those.
But when you say avoid them, what does that mean? You're not putting solar panels on there, or you are providing sufficient buffers to deal with when we have these all of a sudden streams that were not there before, now are for a short period of time?
Do you want to?
I think to answer your question.
You need to go to the microphone, I'm sorry.
So my name is Rick Thomas, and I'm with the Timmons Group, and I am a professional wetland scientist and a professional wetland delineator. So I've made most of my career in the wetland profession. And to answer your question directly about how the project has avoided sensitive environmental features, I think Craig has touched on that largely, in that we've avoided and buffered those areas sufficiently to allow for natural vegetation to be between our facilities and those sensitive environmental features.
Thank you.
all right, fiscal economic benefits. This is the point that's changed the most in recent memory for solar. Really, all of the revenue I'm going to talk about today is a new feature. Pretty much any solar facility you drive past in Virginia today is not going to have been paying this type of money. This is a new feature. So once you approve this special exception, the real estate values will increase significantly for the subject properties. We estimate that increase in versus your current revenues for that same area will be about $2.8 million. A lot of that's function of properties coming out of land use. And then revenue share payments. This feature was created in 2020 and updated this year. It assesses $1,400 per megawatt capacity tax on the nameplate capacity of the project. It was originally enacted as just a flat $1,400, and this year, through cooperation between local governments and the solar industry, we added an escalator of 10% every 5 years, and that goes up in 2026. It's not 10 years of the project's existence, it's 10 years based on passage of time. So it was passed in 2021, so the increase will occur in 2026. That will result in a revenue share payment estimate of $1.1 million. And then additional revenue from the siting agreement. I alluded to the siting agreement at the beginning. We've provided that to staff. That number is still to be determined, and we're currently negotiating that with the board. But I'll talk a little bit more about the site agreement process and how we came up with that vehicle and for what reason in my next slide. Landowner payments, as I alluded to earlier, this is a good thing for property owners. This is money coming to people who live in Lancaster, who own land in Lancaster, and those payments will be made over the life of the project. That's really found money. And in this project, different than a lot of the ones I work on, there's a lot of local folks that are participants. It's been a real benefit working on this project, to get to know the folks who are actively participating and will benefit from it. I know it's all folks you know. Mr. Lee asked about jobs, and we've covered that, and we're estimating about 4 permanent jobs for a project of this size.
Does this increase or decrease or have no relevance to the property value of adjacent properties?
So a lot of information out there on that, and every study I've seen shows no impact to, and in fact, oddly enough, a slight increase in property values. And they attribute that impact to things like buffering and setbacks. So an area where you may have been open to any other adjacent use, you now have a guaranteed buffer between that adjacent property and some other future facility that is guaranteed for 40 years. So there's folks that make a living doing these estimates. They're in the process now of confirming their statewide work with what local assessors' offices are experiencing. And just in Louisa, was working on a project there earlier last month. Our consultant who'd come up with a Louisa-specific study made his presentation to the board, and a board member had taken his presentation to the Commissioner of Revenue or the Assessor's Office and confirmed that those numbers were correct based on their experience with the projects that were already in the ground. So it's at least no impact to adjacent properties.
Thank you.
And I'll just say that if you'd be interested, we could do a specific study looking at this project, factoring in the buffers, the landscaping that are in this ordinance, and let an appraiser take a look. Because there's a lot of data out there from existing projects, looking at property values, and we'd be happy to do that here if you'd be interested.
Yeah, there's enough projects in the ground in Virginia, we've got a good concept.
Thank you.
All right, the siting agreement. So siting agreements were born out of really necessity in developing solar facilities. Solar developers were entering what we were calling voluntary payment agreements with counties to essentially house the economic development proposition associated with solar, payments beyond what was statutorily required for this facility to pay. Both local governments and the solar community agreed that was probably not the best vehicle, but from an enforceability perspective. So we looked at a model that's actually been used for landfills. So the siting agreement model houses the business terms, houses the payment terms of those additional funds, and it's created by statute. So from an enforceability perspective, it's about as bulletproof as they come. As in this case, in most cases, it includes voluntary funding above and beyond the statutory obligation. In approving the siting agreement, just like in approving your special exception pursuant to your special exception ordinance, in approving the siting agreement, the Board of Supervisors is deeming the project to be in substantial accord with the comprehensive plan. That's an additional feature of that, and you guys have belts and suspenders with it being specifically spelled out in your ordinance. Siting agreement may contain terms that supersede provisions of the zoning ordinance as necessary. So that's in there in the event that there's some odd project feature, like a corner that can't comply with a setback. And instead of having to go through the zoning text amendment process, you can add a provision to address that specific feature. That's as a convenience to both the development community and to the locality, that you can make that decision for this specific parcel as part of this specific project without waiving or changing your ordinance that will affect any future project. This is probably the best and most kind of underutilized at this date feature of a siting agreement. It binds future governing bodies. So the siting agreement itself can be used as a financing instrument to secure anticipation bonds. So if the life of the siting agreement, let me back up 1 second. What we're doing in these siting agreements is not just housing the voluntary payment funds in there. We are cycling the other local government revenues through it. So your revenue share and your increase in real estate tax assessments. Housing all that money in the siting agreement so that full value can be used to secure anticipation bonds for you all to accomplish some project using the full weight of the economic impact of the project. Siting agreement process has been around since 2020. To my knowledge, no one has used a siting agreement to secure an anticipation bond, but all the features that are required are there. So this is something as projects who have entered a siting agreement are getting built and becoming operational, we're going to see local governments do. So we're going to be a part of making sure that process works well. Last, I want to talk a little bit about our conditions. We've touched on a lot of this stuff today. Just for you all and the general public's knowledge, the proposed conditions are included in your packet, but we've covered decommissioning, we've covered landscaping. There's specific provisions in there regarding erosion and sediment control. One of the things that's very important to the public is emergency services, and on two fronts. That involves access to the facility in the event there was something to respond to, provisions in the conditions relating to that, and also emergency services training. We're agreeing to do annual training for the life of the project on an as-needed basis for your local EMS. We've also proposed a emergency action plan, emergency response plan, rather. That's what I think is a very good document. It essentially sets the guideposts for how any future owner of the project is to coordinate with your local emergency services, and really has placeholders for specific provisions that your emergency services people can sit down and say, hey, I need X, Y, and Z. It's all going to be provided for in that emergency response plan. Setbacks, we've covered that. We're meeting or exceeding your ordinance. Noise, same way, meeting or exceeding. We also, this is a feature of conditions that our office proposes, is public liaison. So someone whose information is publicly available during the duration of the construction of the project, so that questions are routed to them, either from you all or from the general public. That hopefully takes the pressure off of Don and Brian's phones ringing, saying, hey, what's going on over there? There'll be some public affairs person on part of the developer and owner who handles those inquiries. And then as I touched on, reimbursement of the county for third-party expenses. We want to make sure that you all are held harmless during construction for any costs you incur. I believe that's my last slide, if I'm not mistaken. Do you all have any other questions? Sure.
The emergency response plan, you intend to talk with our people, with Matt Smith.
Correct.
And his people.
Correct. And I believe they've already commented on it to some degree, right?
Yeah, that's taking place.
Yeah.
Okay, it's taking place now.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. And Craig met with the local representatives of the volunteer fire department just last evening. So
Okay.
kind of get that ball rolling. Anybody else?
Okay. Anyone else? And as I said, then we have some time left, so we'll open it up to the public. You have any questions or that you want to ask the group while they're here, please do so. And come forward to state your name, what district you represent or in.
Thank you, sir. My name is John Henley. I live in Laurel Point, your area, sir. I'm a retired professional engineer. 2+ weeks ago, my wife and I came up one morning, wasn't quite hot today, reviewed the documents in the office. We didn't review the whole thing because it must be 100 pages or so, but we reviewed a lot of the information. We looked at drawings, I guess actually it was aerial photos. And then we went out and drove around and tried to find some of the spots. But I did have several questions. On your website, I don't know who to address this question to, you allow folks to ask questions, which I did. I've not gotten a response, so I'll ask you a couple of questions I had. I'm going to start with one of the latter ones. What is the benefit to the county? Somebody in here is going to get a $2, $3, $5 reduction in their electric bill per month. I don't know if that's a question. But I presume, probably falsely, that there's going to be some reduction. The other question I had was, what are the costs of the panels? I know that may be a number that you don't know now, but where are those panels going to be manufactured? Are they going to be manufactured in Idaho or China? So I'll throw a number out. So there's $10 million worth of panels to be procured, and I have no idea if that's the right number or not, and put in this project. Are they going to bid the United States of America, or are they going to bid the Chinese government? And that was one of the questions too in this case that I asked you guys on the website. I am not certainly against the solar panels. I thought your questions, Doctor, were very good about the arsenic, I recall, is also in these panels. I can't imagine that if a panel were to be broken, and I suspect with the several thousand panels there will be some broken, that the groundwater will not erode, if you will, the stuff that's is the material that's left over from a broken panel. I can't imagine that out here in our beautiful bay that some of that stuff's not going to show up, and I think your request, sir, to ask for some more specific analysis of that is a super one. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, I'm sorry, I didn't hear your name, and can you tell me your name again?
Henley, Henley, John.
Mr. Henley, well, I apologize, first of all. Those questions that come through our website come to my email, and I get a lot of email, and I just must have missed it, so I apologize. I'm happy to answer your questions now, and would also be happy if you have additional ones, we can talk via email. But you asked several of them. Benefits to the county, I think the primary benefits, I would say, are revenue to the county and revenue to landowners. Like Scott mentioned, the majority of these landowners live locally. There are 22 of them. The payments that they get from participating in the solar project will then go to the Oaks, to the local businesses and restaurants. So then, of course, there's the $15+ million in tax payments to the county, which the county can decide how to use, whether that's helping fund new schools or lowering property tax rates. That's a matter for your board and not for me. As far as your electric bills, that's a little bit of a complicated question. The electrons that are produced at this facility will absolutely end up in this courthouse and in houses along Route 3 and on the water, because electricity flows like water. But that will not have a direct impact on your bills, because we will be signing a contract with a large utility or industrial user, or potentially a data center like a Facebook, to purchase the electricity from this facility. So there's kind of a contractual answer where an entity will be buying the power. Yes, some of the power will be used locally, but it likely won't have it certainly won't have a direct impact on your bill. In terms of the panels, we don't yet know which panel we're going to use. I'm sorry, we will know at some point in the process, and the vast majority of the panels are made in Asia. Some of them are made in China, a lot of them are made in Taiwan or Korea or other countries. The only panel that I'm aware of, Mike can correct me on this, that is manufactured in the United States are the First Solar panels. That's the thin film, and those are manufactured in Ohio. That's absolutely a possibility. We just don't yet know which panel we will make, and we will know, and I'd be happy to let you know once that decision is made.
But you understand, sir, my question is, we're benefiting Asia, Taiwan, wherever it is, as opposed to the United States government. Us guys here in Lancaster County, that was the point I was making. You've got 140 or so, 39 people going involved in the construction. 3 or 4 are going to be full-time employees for 37 and a half years or whatever the number is.
Mm-hmm.
The only point I was making was it's unfortunate, and I understand what you're saying, that these panels are not coming out of something being produced here within our country.
It's a fair point. I mean, it is most of our economy is now globalized, and I don't think that's unique to solar. But you're right. I would love to see more of them manufactured here. As far as how much panels cost, Mike may be able to give us an idea. I mean, that it's a significant share of the total costs of a project, but because we haven't picked the panel, but it's a significant share of the total cost of the project.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
Was Michael Schellenberger incorrect when he said that China can afford to do these panels cheaper, subsidize the manufacturing of the panels because they use slave labor to put those panels together?
I think there's a real issue there. I'm not an expert on that, but I'm probably like you, when the Biden administration just decided to actually enforce a law that's on the books to prevent solar panel manufacturers from buying. It's not actually directly the panels. As I understand it, it's one of the components of the panels. One of the manufacturers of those components has manufacturing facilities, and I forget the name of the province, but it's where the Uyghurs, there have been lots of human rights violations. And so he is, I believe, has put a system in place that is going to enforce that panels coming to the United States cannot be coming from those facilities that appear to be using slave labor. So
Well, the real question is, can we, as part of this agreement that we may bless, can we require that the panels be made in the United States? I know it cuts into your profit margin possibly, probably not yours, but the people you're gonna sell this to. So is that something that we can do?
Require that the panels that we use at this project.
Made in the USA.
I mean,
I think that's a tough thing to commit to, in that this is a land use case, and if we were to think of a corollary, I think of solar panels like flat screen TVs, where when you go to buy a flat screen TV, you're looking at the quality, the cost, et cetera. And in a land use case, if somebody was looking to build a new commercial real estate development, you wouldn't be restricting what type of flat screen TVs they were using inside the commercial real estate development. We have an interest in supporting the American economy. We are Americans, we're hardworking Americans, we're trying to bring investment to this community. But to limit the supply chain of the components to must be made in America, I think is a limitation that would challenge the economic viability of the project.
Yeah, which means that you would make more money if you buy cheaper panels from China. That's the economic viability of the project.
If we go back to the analogy of flat screen TVs, or this overhead projector, or this laptop, or the phone in our pocket, we don't necessarily question, should I buy this laptop because it's made here, there, or whatever. We make a value-based decision on what is the best value for the procurement that we're trying to satisfy, and I think that principle holds here as well.
I think we disagree.
Question regarding that. Would it not be that even though, say, panels may be manufactured, it's just like much anything else that's manufactured, other components come from other countries and are essentially put together maybe in America, like cars? Ford manufactures lots of cars, BMW manufactures lots of cars here in America, but a lot of those components are still coming from different countries because of that global economy. Wouldn't it be the same with solar panels?
The way that the free market global economy works is that resources and services and capital are coordinated in a fashion to provide the greatest value to society. With that free market conservative principle in mind, we don't want to restrict where the components for a particular land use case can come from.
I would argue that it's not value, it's cost.
But as the one making the financial decision, the one sponsoring the project, the one committing the capital, I'm actually the one in the position to make the value-based decision on what procurement makes sense for the long-term value of the project. And in that situation, it is truly a value calculation. If you're to put restrictions on where components can come from, it could challenge the economic viability of the project. And all of the investment and revenue opportunity for the county could never come to fruition if that restriction was placed on the project.
Yeah, I think you've already made up your mind where you're gonna buy the panels. I think all of this talk about, well, we haven't made a decision yet, I think that's a bunch of hooey. Because I think you've definitely made the decision already, and that's what you're talking about. Now
Well,
you're trying to put lipstick on it.
Just so that we're all on the same page, there have been no panel selection decisions made other than our commitment in this hearing today to commit to using Tier 1 modules that must pass the EPA TCLP test. That's something that we discussed. If you would like to add a further limitation that we are restricted from using forced labor in the supply chain, we're happy to entertain that as well.
I don't see how you could do that, but
And as you can guess, I come at this from the legal perspective. Committing to the Tier 1 manufacturer and having passed the EPA's test, that's germane to a land use concern. That's an environmental, local impact concern. And the purposes of these conditions is to house those types of matters. The origin of a panel and the country of origin of a panel is probably not germane to how this project impacts the community of Lancaster. So it's, as far as it being a suitable condition, I would have doubts.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Costello?
Couple of things. The list of participating properties, is that the people we talk about, the local people that are gonna have the revenue coming in and so on? Is that what we're talking about? Is that?
That's a portion of it.
It's a portion of it.
Can you talk
But
into?
it's quite,
Yeah, thanks.
it's quite a bit. In fact, these are the property owners that have the property. You have some others that have transmission lines going across them and so on. That's not in part of this project, and you don't show them. At
That's,
all.
yeah, that's correct. The list that you're
So,
looking,
for the listing that you have here, this is the acreage and the impact, and taking from the leases that are in the package match with this listing, correct? That's in Exhibit 11, I think it is?
yes.
Okay. So we talk about local. Well, it depends on what you call local. But Charlotte, North Carolina is hardly local. Churchview, Virginia is not local. It's not even on the northern neck. Arlington, Virginia is not local. Burgess is Northumberland. And Heathsville is Northumberland. There are 2 local people listed, as I have it, for Lancaster County. Tom and Brenda Tolles, and Jackie and Robin Barrick. They have a total of impact. There are 1,400 acres that are being impacted. There are 2,414.145 acres under lease per this listing. The 2 local people have 294 acres. The other 1,400, so that leaves 1,100 acres that are not, to me, local and will not be going to the Oaks for dinner. So the revenue that's going for that portion for 1,100 acres is going outside the county. Another item. We talk about siting agreements. I believe that siting agreements are not part of the Freedom of Information Act. Is that correct? So you can have a Freedom of Information Act and get a copy of the siting agreement.
What? Use a microphone, please.
I'm happy to explain the process. So, the way the siting agreement process works, pursuant to the statute, when a developer intends to site a solar facility in a given locality, provide notice of intent to locate the facility, which we did to Jim and Don. At that point, we send the document to Jim, and it's reviewed by a subcommittee of the board, and the financial terms, the initial financial terms, are negotiated pursuant to exceptions to FOIA. That ends when the siting agreement is put on the agenda for the Board of Supervisors' consideration, which, based on our current schedule, will happen in October. So that document will be released to the public with the October agenda packet for the Board of Supervisors. And the tentative terms, the not yet final terms of the agreement, will be included in that public notice.
Okay.
So that's, in essence, we release the draft, and then the final approval and discussion happens in the public forum. So it's about 50% of the way through the document becomes public. That's
Okay.
correct.
Because I did read that it was not part of the Freedom of Information Act, not subject to it.
Correct. At this point, it is not.
At this point.
Right.
So it's preliminary on the draft And that's fairly common of contracts you're dealing with.
Economic
before,
development
and then it
prospects,
goes
exactly,
After that.
exactly.
Okay, that's fine. I'm glad to hear that. Also, I'm curious about funneling all the funding through the siding agreement. Just seems a little awkward, but,
And
you
that's,
know, that's what you are gonna have to go through and decide on the financial side, which is the best way of handling those
and
things.
that's 100%
Now, I've got
Charles'
one
option,
other,
so.
because you're gonna run into time and maybe some other people. In the conditions portion, if I get this iPad to act right.
Charlie, while you're looking for it, can he answer the last thing? He started to answer and you.
Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry.
Sure, yeah. Cycling all streams of revenue that are generated by the project through the siding agreement is 100% your all's option. You can direct those funds however you like. And, you know, the siding agreement funds can be used to, you know, for any variety of things. We've devoted them to, you know, a number of municipal projects on the projects we've completed, including your all's VDOT Broadband match, you know, et cetera. That's what we used Swan and King Queen for. Others have built communication facilities for EMS providers, upgraded EMS communications. It's really just a local government tool in the toolkit for financing public needs.
Thank you. Thank you, Charlie.
The other thing is the conditions and so on, and this we've discussed, Jason. Effective conditions, previously stated, the proposed SE conditions are consistent with the ordinance. But in the event of any inconsistency, the conditions shall control. To me, the ordinance that you all approved and so on and can change or work with is a controlling element, not the conditions. And that's mentioned in the summary, and it's the last item mentioned in the conditions. Thank you.
Sure, I'm happy to speak to that. That's a legal catch-all. So a number of these conditions are a distillation of what is specifically outlined in the ordinance. They are, to my knowledge, in no way inconsistent with the language of the ordinance and the requirements of the ordinance. They are just a different way of saying them. So Mr. Cornwell's going to want to check me to make sure that they're not inconsistent. But the purpose of that is, in the event of any inconsistency, we know what document is binding. And frankly, we feel that our conditions are stronger and as concise and clear as possible, and we want that to be binding on us. So that is a provision that cuts against us and to the benefit of the county, because the conditions are in front of you. They're for your discussion and deliberation and review by your county attorney. That provision really should be construed against us and excused in your favor.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else from the audience, come forward, state your name and what district you're from.
Good evening. My name is Philip Haney, and we're from the Nutsville district. I wanted to address one of the issues that Charlie brought up. Ours has a Burgess address, but we're in Nutsville. And the thing that we need to look at, the resources that would come from this solar project, we would reinvest money back into the property in Lancaster. And I guess the question before you is, or what you should look at is, basically not what the landowners are going to do with their resources, but what is the county going to get out of that property if I keep farming it, or what is the county going to get out of it if it goes into solar? Which one of those is going to create the greater income for the county, which would make life better for all of the citizens in the county? Thank you.
Additional comments? All right.
Hello, my name is Thomas Tolles. Brenda's my wife. We planning on hopefully having those panels on my phone. I'm gonna be living on the phone, and I'll be within 100 feet of them. And just this past week, I went up on 360 and took pictures of the solar panels and to see if there was any dead grass or anything under the solar panel, and the grass is growing green as out. And I don't want anything to happen to y'all or me or anyone in the county. So I've been watching this. There's another set of panels over on Route 50 in Maryland. I've been watching for 5 years. And everything's green and everything's fine so far. And I wouldn't want anything, like I say, happen. In 2045, I think we all got to go to some sort of renewable energy. So we even gonna go nuclear, and if you go with the wind, they made in Canada, all them big turbines, they made in Canada and shipped to the United States. I've been to the Illinois where there's thousands of acres of wind turbines. So we all got to do something. I don't know what, but I'm hoping this is the way to go. And we're gonna go nuclear, and Chernobyl, look what happened over there. I mean, I don't know the issues, and like you read in the book about that guy telling you about the pros and cons, there's Democrats writing books, there's Republicans writing books, so nobody really has an issue, just like this COVID. They want us to have more shots. All right, I've had all my shots, and you know, some people will have masks, some people don't. So it's just one of them issues, and I don't want anything to happen to y'all. And there's a lot of tiles in these ravines. So for environmental purposes, you ride down the road on a combine, and there's tiles all in all these ravines. So that's not environmentally friendly either. So we need to address that also, and not just kick solar panels in the head, you know. And I commend you on, you know, going forfeit with this and trying to find out the pros and cons, which is a good idea, but don't just jump into it. But it's coming. We got Tesla cars coming. We got Ford trucks coming with all that batteries and stuff. And I was talking to a guy just the other day that was a record guy. And he said it's gonna be a mess because all that battery stuff is really gonna be a big, big mess. And so we can't just kick solar, because then we gotta kick Ford out or Tesla out and all that sort of thing. So I just think we need to keep an open mind, and we gotta go to do something. So I'm willing to put my farm in for it. And if I start drying up, y'all just pack up and leave, as long as I can tell you. I appreciate your time, and thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Toles. Thank you very much. All right. There's anyone else from the public want to make a comment? All right, come on forward, sir.
How y'all doing? My name is Wade Moore. I live in District 1. One of my questions is, if they put these solar panels there, how many more companies is going to come in the county and put solar panels in here?
As many that want to.
That's what I'm getting at. Once you open that door right there, they're going to pile in here. John Hancock ain't spending all that money cutting his timber, and got 2 surveyors from West Virginia been here since February checking the property out, and then they got 2 or 3 more pickups and 4 or 5 of them walking that cutover up. And I'm pretty sure they ain't looking for copperheads and ticks and triggers out there. But if it was such an eyesore that we had to put the power underground across the Rappahannock, how come it ain't an eyesore for us around here that live right there in this area to look at these solar panels?
Well, first of all, I didn't mean to be flip when I said as many as want to. The simple fact of the matter is, when you change the zoning ordinances in A1 and A2, and I even argued if you're gonna do it in R1 too. Why not? Why not? You know, there's plenty of ground out there where there aren't other houses that are zoned residential, but there's nothing on them. But the fact of the matter is, when it becomes a permitted use, albeit by special exception, that is in fact the answer. Anybody that wants to come in can do it, or at least come before this board and ask that it occur.
Well, Lancaster County is not this big a county. I mean, and maybe some people don't think this up here is very important, but It looks awful nice to me, and I hate to see it messed up. And solar panels, what are you getting out of them? How much oxygen do they produce that we breathe every day? You ain't gonna get no food out of them. You ain't gonna get no more timber out of them. You ain't gonna get no paper, no lumber, or nothing else out of them. And that's 40 years. It ain't like painting your house one color, and you say next year, you know, I really don't like that, and I'm gonna change that. Well, you ain't gonna take them up after they don't look good to you. So, I don't know, if y'all pass it, I don't think y'all are thinking right. That's my opinion of it. So, I don't know. But
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
these gentlemen here got it. They think more.
Let's say, hold on a minute, y'all jump. Somebody over here had raised their hand. Which one was it? Oh. All right, so you go in that order. You can go first. All right, you go second, and Jimmy, you third. And we got about 10 more minutes left.
I'm not gonna take much of your time, Jack.
Okay.
Charlie Dickson, I'm in Ernest Palin's district, whatever that is, 2 or 1,
Two.
been changed 2 or 3 damn times. I don't know where I'll be next, but anyway, I'm in with Ernest now.
All right.
I just have a few things to say. Number one, I don't like the solar panels. I've been up here for 50 years, and I'm riding up down the road by Mr. Haynes' farm, wherever he is, and I always saw corn or beans in the field. I don't want to ride by there and see solar panels out there. They don't look very good. Don't like them. Shouldn't be there. If you're gonna have solar panels, put solar panels on a roof. Put it on people's homes. It'll be a whole lot better than messing up a field. Okay, it's no good. They're no good in the field. And number 3, a lot of interest here, and I'm not stepping on anybody's toes, because I lived around them for 50 years, like I say, and I got a lot of friends in the farming business. But it's a lot of interest here from farmers. The only thing I can say to them is do 1 or 2 things. You be in the farming business, or you be in the electrical business. You shouldn't be in both. That's all I
Thank you,
got.
sir. All right, sir, you?
I've been over here for a year and a half, talking to y'all. And I'm not gonna let Open Road sit there and tell me and this board that it's not gonna devalue our property. Because I've been living up in Alfonso. I have a beautiful farm up there. I invited all y'all up there. I think most of y'all know where my farm is. And they're gonna have solar panels behind me and on the side of me. And I don't care, they can plant trees or they can do what they want. But you tell me that it's not gonna devalue our land to the county? You got people in this county already getting ready to sell houses because they don't want to see the solar in this county. This is not the county for solar. I was on a board this week through the state for DEQ and a couple other organizations, and they are very concerned. Department of Agriculture is very concerned right now because we got so many acres going into it, taking forestry land and farmland. The big thing is, like Mr. Moore said, once we cut these trees down and do stuff, they don't come back in 10, 15 years. And as far as, you know, open roads is a development. Then you got to get it to to a place they're gonna have to, all they're doing is development. They're gonna sell it to Virginia Power. Well, I was at a meeting over the courthouse, over the school about a month ago with Virginia Power, who's doing this area for solar. And they're gonna, all this solar is gonna be sold to them. Well, done something, like that, okay? The battery packs are very bad. Virginia Power has already said they're gonna have batteries into it. If you look at, what they wanna do and everything, and like Charlie said, is once you open this up, you got, it's places on level 3, it's places going into Irvington that's gonna have, it's on the books right now for solar. once you open it up, it's gonna be open up to the whole county. You can't say, you know, you can do it, but you can't do it. You know, that's not gonna work. And like I say, it's not gonna help the county, it's gonna devalue the county's land.
Mr. Forrester, I'm doing this very
All right, that's
respectful because
what
we
I-
know one another, okay? All right, because,
Well, no, that's, well, I'll
yeah.
let, somebody else talk.
Yeah.
That's my feelings.
thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And please, make it to, while these gentlemen are here, ask them the questions that you may have. I mean, y'all can talk to us anytime we have a meeting, but ask these gentlemen why they're here. You got 5 of them, specialists. Okay, thank you,
That was
sir.
a good segue, Mr. Bailey, for my question. So I'm Jimmy Carter from District 5. So we know that economics drive all business decisions. And so what I'm trying, as I understand it, the value proposition for you all is that there's latent capability within the transmission lines, and that's what makes this area attractive. So the question is, I think we're all concerned about, you know, how many solar projects could this county actually handle? So the question I'd like to hear answered is that, would this project basically eat up that latent capability that's in the transmission lines, and then if someone else came along and wanted to do another project of this size, would it be economically unreasonable to think that there would be another project like this? So I'm trying to get my arms around, is this a one-off, or would we expect to be seeing other large projects like this in the future, or will this eat up the value proposition within the transmission lines?
Okay, all right.
It's a great question, and I think the analogy that helps people understand this is that a transmission line is like a pipeline. As you fill it up with water, at some point it becomes full and there's no more room for water to flow through that pipeline. We have done extensive analyses. There's only one high voltage transmission line that runs through the county, and we've done extensive analyses of it, and it's a public study process that's governed by a public body. PJM manages the interconnection study process, and based on our analyses and based on the studies that are available on PJM's website, there is only room for 2 large-scale projects on this transmission line. There's one already proposed in Richmond County that already has a permit, and then if you were to approve this project, those 2 projects will take up all of the capacity on that transmission line. So unless or until that line is expanded, which is a very long-term and very expensive process, there is no more room for large-scale projects like this one.
Yeah, just one additional data point. It's a great question and a very understandable concern. The Dominion project that's been proposed in Lancaster County as well just received its system impact study results, and it showed $85 million in network upgrades to facilitate that project, because they would need to reconductor the line and build it. This project, for example, does not have network upgrades because it fits on the line with the latent capacity, as you said it, or like a pipe with water flowing through it with room for it. So this project, along with the project in Richmond County, would utilize the injection capacity on the line.
All right, Mr. Costello, I think you hit, and hold your comments and you come back later. All right, go ahead. I know what he got ready to say. All right.
The line runs from Harmony Grove, you all know where Harmony Grove is, down Route 3 to the water. That is all capable of 230, and the lines are already there for 230. The towers that were going to come across the river were to be constructed to capable of carrying 230. I'm sure that under the river, those lines are already capable of carrying 230 to that substation in Whitestone. Now, the $85 million is chump change when you consider what they've already put out to put those lines across the Rappahannock River. I don't know what the total is, but it was a good deal of money. They didn't do that or make those things for towers capable of 230 just for the hell of it. So there's your thing coming across. And Mr. Volpe, I know Mike Volpe from Massachusetts. He was a commissioner of transportation at one time. So when you heard your name, I had real ideas, but there are too many potholes. Thank you.
All right, okay, I want him to respond. We got one more, and then we're right 6:59 now. All right, so come on, and then Mr. Barrett, after they finish their response, and then we're going.
Very much appreciate the
cut it off.
conversation about the transmission system. I actually run the interconnection process for our company, and this site was identified because of the latent capacity on the line. If a line is going to be upgraded, it either is due to the regional transmission expansion plan that PJM runs or due to a new generator interconnection process. The $85 million is because of Dominion's proposed project, and that's a new generator interconnection process. It's a new generator that's being proposed that triggers network upgrades. There are no expansion plans in the regional transmission expansion plan for the Garner to Lancaster 115 kV circuit in PJM. I checked it last night before this. With regards to the new generator interconnection saying that's chump change, the State Corporation Commission, via statute, obligates a competitive process where projects bid into a competitive process, including the ones that VEPCO self-develops, and the $85 million burden that their project will have versus competing projects that have no network upgrade costs. That fact deems their project economically inviable because of the network upgrade cost, from my perspective. So I hope that helps, and I'm happy to chat afterwards.
So you're saying it will not be built? Even though they've put out the leases and so on, maybe...
I would be happy to put money on the table to say it will not be built.
Okay.
My personal money.
All right.
Hi, gentlemen. Nice to see you again. I want to make a quick comment in regards to losing farmland for solar. Solar farms are probably the best conservation tool for agriculture, and I want to tell you why. Forestry production, a mature stand of saw timber is harvestable in 28 to 35 years. Most foresters will tell you that. A solar farm's life, this thing is 30 to 40 years. So, and a solar farm developer doesn't want any land with more than a 10 or 12% grade, from what I understand. So this makes it ideal for farmland. There's a lot of farmland being farmed already with steeper grades than that. There's farmland being opened up every day in Lancaster County, as we talk, from forestry land. When a solar farm is at the end of its useful life, the land can be used for agricultural production or put back in trees. So the land is already clear cut and cleared, the land is suitable to go into crops. The solar farms preserve land that could possibly be developed, farmland that would otherwise be lost and not preserved. In the past 30 or 40 years, I will bet you that farm and timberland within a 3 or 4 mile radius of this courthouse where we're standing at has been developed is larger than the Waller Solar Project. And one last thing, you can't tell a farmer he has to farm the land. He can do what he wants to with it. He can grow trees, he can grow nothing. The farmland, as it's referred to, could remain dormant if the farmer chooses not to farm it. So we really aren't losing farmland. We're just putting it in a conservation bank for 30 years. Thank you so much, gentlemen. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. And at that point, we're going to end it here. We've already ran overtime. I think this work session that we've just had was very beneficial to not only us as the board members, but also to you as the public. I want to thank you also for your participation in this part and your understanding with certain things as far as time constriction right now, because we could be here probably another couple of hours. But having said that, this board's been here for a little while. We're getting ready to go into another meeting, and I'm going to give us a 5-minute recess. Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir. call this session back to order. Okay, now we're in our regular session, session for the month. And first we have the public input session. Hold on a minute. Oh, is it on? Yeah, it's thank you. Thank you. All right. All right, anyway, public input session is for you to, anyone in the audience that has something to say or talk with us about that is not on the agenda, that is not on the present agenda. Also, you have a 3-minute time limit, and I will give you a 1-minute warning sign by holding up this sign. All right, so, and that's the same for online. We're gonna also allow the people that are attending this session online to do the same thing. All right, don't let me forget that. All right, so, all right. Okay, at this time, Mr. Carter, so his hand.
Good evening, Jimmy Carter, District 5. Mr. Palin, I hope you'll give maybe each speaker here 3 minutes. Tonight, I wanted to give you all an update on what's going on at Rappahannock General. And, you know, what I'd like to say about Rappahannock General, that's important not only to the medical health of this community, but it's also essentially important to the economic health of this community, too. And with the COVID, you can appreciate that we've been under a lot of work at Rappahannock General, and tonight what I wanted to do was we have a new hospital administrator and a new director of nursing, and I wanted tonight to bring them in and introduce you. And what we'd like to do is, so I've got Mr. Alan Bailey here, who is our new hospital administrator, and I've got Sarah Farmer, who is our new director of nursing. Both of these are the two most important positions at the hospital.
Welcome aboard.
Pardon me?
I said welcome aboard.
Yeah. So, you know, 6 years ago, as you know, we assimilated into the Bon Secours system. And I'd just like to retrospectively say that I was chairman of the Strategic Planning Committee for the prior hospital board. And 6 years ago, we were faced with the difficult proposition of could we even keep this hospital open? And I'd just like to say that personally, I believe that the merger with Bon Secours has been a tremendous success. They've invested $15 million in the hospital. At the time, our parking lots were in disarray. We were faced with, do we buy new equipment or do we fix the box up? And so we've gotten all new equipment to better respond to the needs of our citizens. We're getting ready to make some major improvements that we'll be talking about in a second. We've gotten all of our employees, we're at full employment. We've gotten economic parity with hospitals in other areas. I just feel that Bon Secours has done for us what no one else would do. At the time of the merger, B.H. Hubbard, myself, and Jim Holmes, our past administrator, we talked to all hospitals in the region, from Northern Virginia to UVA, the VCU, the HCA, to Centera. We went down the block and talked to everybody. And clearly, Bon Secours was our best partner, and I'd just like to give them a vote of confidence, just to say that I'm extremely pleased on where we were was problematic, where we are, we're secured, and I just think it's been terrific. So I've asked, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to our hospital administrator, Alan Bailey.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Yeah.
And thank you for your time. I appreciate it. As Jimmy said, my name is Alan Bailey. I'm the administrator of Rappahannock. I've been with Bon Secours for about 21 years, and I moved down to the Rappahannock area just after January 1st of this year. I've been with the system quite a while. Most of my time I've spent in hospital operations, and I'm honored to take over the helm at the hospital down here now. Two things that Jimmy asked me to go over. The first was our construction, and hopefully anybody who's drove by the hospital has seen that we have a lot of work going on out there. We are changing the emergency department as well as the cafe, as well as the main entrance of the hospital, and modernizing and changing and expanding. It's a 22-month construction project, which we just got started about 3 months ago, so we still have a ways to go, but you can already see significant improvements in the face of the hospital. It's also going to make us more efficient in how we respond to the patients, because access to the front of the hospital will be easier, and in addition, access to the emergency department will be much easier. This is just the first of many items that we have planned for the hospital that we look to expand and change things, such as increasing the size of our outpatient infusion center, as well as bringing the face of the hospital inside up to the same standards that we're seeing in the emergency department and main entrance. The only other thing that I'd like to talk about very quickly is COVID. We are seeing an additional numbers of COVID patients come into our emergency department, the same as you see when you turn on the news every night. It is certainly not as significant in this area as it is in many areas, but we went for almost 2 months without seeing any COVID positive patients whatsoever. And we have had several days where we have had as many as 5 patients come into our emergency department who were COVID positive. So we are seeing some of those patients show back up. Across our Bon Secours system and within our hospital, we have reinstituted our weekly COVID calls where we talk about how many patients we're seeing and what we need to do to respond to it. We're doing this both at our hospital level as well as a regional level with Bon Secours Richmond. And we've also pulled out all of our plans for surge, that if we would happen to have a surge capacity of 15, 20, 30 patients show up on our door in a very short period of time, how would we respond to that? And we've pulled all those plans back out, and we have those back on, and we're keeping those right on the top of our desk to make sure that we're ready to respond to needs of the community. And just lastly, I'd like to say thank you to the community. Many people that I've seen and talked with are very supportive of the hospital, which we certainly appreciate that. And my goal in leading the hospital is to make the hospital an embedded part of the community like it has been for the last 44 years. And I'd like to do it for the next 40 years. And the legacy that I leave behind, I want it to be one that's a lasting legacy. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Farmer, and yes, this is a real accent. I'm new to the area. I have just joined Bon Secours May this year. I'm from coastal North Carolina, where I've been in nursing for greater than 25 years, nursing administration for the last 15. I came to this area because it reminds me so much of my home. They recruited me for nursing in this area, and once I visited you, I knew I wasn't going to leave, that I was going to stay here. So I quickly became invested in this hospital. My family were all farmers and fishermen, and I want to make sure that this community has what I helped to build in my community back home, a very robust medical system that takes care of its people. I wanted just to let you know a minute about what nursing is doing at Rappahannock. We have identified that we need to expand as often and as much as we can the services offered to you. So nursing at this point, we're working on our education programs to ensure that we can bring back our progressive care unit, our advanced telemetry. I know that several years ago when the intensive care left the hospital, it was a big source of disturbance for the people in the county. And so we're going to be bringing back the programs that help to improve the care that we have in the hospital. And the nurses are now going through quite a bit of education to ensure that they're ready for that care. We're also expanding our footprint within the community. You're going to see the nurses and the team at Rappahannock out and about. We're going to be helping our community in so many ways with health fairs and COVID and anything that we see as a need for your community. We welcome any information that you can give us. We want you to give us input as to what you think is most important for this community and what the hospital needs to focus on. But as Alan said, we're very committed. This is not a flash in the pan for us. We truly want this community to have, and its people to have all it needs from the hospital. So, thank you.
You mentioned about your educational program.
Mm-hmm.
Are you working with the Rappahannock General Hospital, Rappahannock Community College?
Yes.
Okay.
We have started many opportunities with them.
Okay.
We actually have one of our nurse educators now sitting on the board to help with decision making for the hospital. We want to develop a pipeline for the nurses in the area to have somewhere to go to work where they get to stay home and help their community and not leave.
Good.
So that's very important that we give our youth and our young people who go to college, give them a reason to stay in this area and be productive for the people that care for them.
Yes, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you for the time.
Just another quick update. I think that Mr. Gill said that he's going to be bringing up later something about a work session with the Business Advisory Committee. I just want to let you know that we've been working hard on that. Mr. Bellows and Mr. Lee have been participating. And so we've had a lot of work going on in the background. We think that we're getting to a good place on that, and we look forward to working with you on that, and appreciate all the work you all do. Thank you so
All right,
much.
thank you very much. All right. Okay, anyone else from the public? Anyone online who wants to comment during public session? Okay, no comments there. All right, so we're gonna move on. Old business? Do we have any old business? Okay, no old business. VDOT.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
Good evening.
My name is David Beal. I'm the resident engineer for the Northern Neck. Hopefully you have my written report in your packet. I apologize in advance. I made a lot of revisions since I sent it in. Mike had all his stuff squared away, but I've got a couple of revisions on my part. The primary mowing is underway, primary route mowing. We've continued to work on shoulder repairs on River Road and Route 3. We removed some tree limbs off of Nugent Lane. We cut brush on James B. Jones, and we cleaned some ditches on Old Airport and Carter's Cove, and we repaired a slope on 200 in Irvington. We'll continue to work on primary route mowing. We have some cross pipes we need to replace on Little Bay, Crawford's Corner, and East Church Street, and we'll continue to fix washouts and shoulders and respond to work orders. Probably the main thing I left off is that we're still planning to pull the ferry the day after Memorial Day. That's September 7th, and we hope to have it back by November 5th. We'll be out of the water in dry dock for painting and other repairs. Mike is going to set message boards on either end on Monday so that the regular patrons of the ferry will be informed. They'll have a week to see that message and know that that will be out of service. On the pavement schedule, the only thing you have left is the plant mix. That's hot mix asphalt on Route 3. The Cape Seal schedule is complete, and the surface treatment schedule is complete. So I'll remove those things next month. On the second page, the secondary 6-year plan, I have summer 2021 for Oliver Lane. The summer's starting to get away from us. It's probably going to be in October, but we're still going to be there this year. On the smart scale portion, I told you last month that the funding for the Route 3 turn lane on 688, the funding is advanced to this fiscal year. We expect design to start in January, and I expect construction on that in 2024. I am still waiting on a detailed schedule, but it's several years ahead of where it was. And I do need to still add the Route 3 and 605 intersection improvement that was awarded this last round of smart scale. Currently, that schedule is showing a fall of 2028 add date, and I will work as we did with the others. I'll work to advance that as the opportunity presents itself, if it presents itself. But currently, based on when the funding is scheduled, we go to add on that project on 2028. The structure and bridge projects are on the report, and there hadn't been any change on them. Last month, we talked about litter. I've looked into how we could set that up. It turns out the secondary 6-year plan is probably not the best way to handle that. The best way to handle that, if the board chooses to fund a litter pickup through VDOT, is to set up a project agreement, and we can work on drafting an agreement. We would need a resolution from the board. The cost for secondary routes, all the secondary routes it's about 6,000, 61, 66 to pick up all the secondary routes in the county, and it's $58.64 to pick up all the primary routes. And that's our current contract. Those are our current prices. So you're looking at about $12,000 to pick up the entire county. I am planning to pick up the county with our final mow about the 1st of October. So if that's something you all want to do, I don't know that you want to do it between now and then. You know, we can talk about it this fall, or whatever you want to do.
Is that 12,000 a one-time?
One time.
And then what does it look like the very next day?
I think the biggest issue
I'd
is,
let Mike.
Rhetorical question, rhetorical question.
generally, y'all have cleaned it up twice a year, basically once in the spring and then once in the fall.
In large part,
And I
as
think if we could-
funding is available. If I don't use a contractor to mow,
What's that? Yeah, if we pick, like, if there's the winter is when it becomes most visible because you're not cutting grass and it goes all winter long. So if we could arrange sometime in the midwinter probably to do it, kind of to split those three. So you kind of split it into thirds. So you have spring, then you have fall, then maybe like February.
okay? I mean, we can do whatever you want to do. I'll check with our contractor too. A lot of his labor moves out of town during the winter. So I have to check and make sure that they're available at that time as well. That's all I had in my report. I'm happy to take any comments, questions you all have.
Mr. Gill, what's that road that we checked out about extending the pavement?
That was Davis Mill Pond Road, and it's on there on the
For
secondary
summer
6-year plan.
2025, okay.
Mhm.
All right. Okay.
What was the issue there?
No, that's the one that Mr. Palin had brought up about extending the paved area 0.2 of a mile. It's already on.
It's on the secondary
Yeah, it's
6-year
already
plan.
on there.
Okay.
It's the third one on the list on the
Mhm.
second page.
Gotcha. Okay, gentlemen, you have anything? All right, okay. All right.
Thank you.
No,
Thank you all. Have a good night.
thank you very much. All right. All right, presentations. Mrs. Bonnie,
Dickson.
Ms. Dickson. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thank you for affording me a few minutes this evening to recognize my deputy, Tracy Lee, and present her with her certification as a Master Governmental Deputy Treasurer. The Treasurer's Certification Program was developed back in 1989 to provide an avenue for the elected treasurer and their deputies to obtain necessary training and education. The program is under the oversight of the Weldon Cooper Center for Public Service at the University of Virginia, and it includes continuing education requirements. To start, Tracy was required to take 2 classes, which included roles and responsibilities of the treasurer and the office, and customer service, so that we have the best customer service possible. Those classes and all of our classes require us to take an exam. We don't want to do that anymore, but yes, we do. There are several other elective classes, such as delinquent collections and bankruptcy, that Tracy has successfully completed to earn the certificate. She will continue earning her education credits each year to maintain her certification. This is not a one-time thing. It is an ongoing, every 4 years we have to recertify by attending these classes and meetings. I want to thank the board for their continued support of this important achievement. I can tell you from my personal experience that you all, and especially the citizens of Lancaster County, benefit a great deal from her participation in this program. The training and education we receive help us to become well-versed in the laws of the Commonwealth, how those laws relate to our county ordinances, and they give us the tools to be good public servants for our citizens. It is my pleasure to present Tracy with her certification this evening, and to make you all aware of the tremendous accomplishment of one of your own. Yep, you're welcome.
All right, thank you. And congratulations, Ms. Lee. Mr. Lee, you got something you want to say? I'm just joking with you. All right. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, we had before us tonight.
Hold on a minute. Let me go to the next one. All right, got one more.
Oh,
All right. I thought you meant something, Miss Tracy Lee.
Oh,
All right.
Mr. Lewis sat down.
All right. Okay, thank you. All right, the next presentation we have here is the Treasurers Association of Virginia Presidential Award. And I'm asking Mrs. Dickson if she would come forward here. All right. And I'm gonna read this. It says, at its most recent annual conference, the Treasurers Association of Virginia awarded Lancaster County Treasurers Bonnie J. Dickson, MGT, with the President's Award. The Treasurers of Association of Virginia asked Mrs. Dickson to assist the King Williams County Treasurer's Office this past year after employees turnover left the office with a very unexperienced staff. Ms. Dickson spent several days there over the course of the last year mentoring that inexperienced staff so that the King Williams County Treasurer's Office could continue normal day-to-day operations. For her effort, Ms. Dickson was recognized with the Treasurers Association of Virginia Award. And this is, I talked with Mrs. Dickson, and she was saying she had no knowledge of this. No one had any knowledge of this. So this is what statement we have from Mrs. Carla Della Pava, the immediate past president of the Treasurers Association of Virginia. And I quote, "The President's Award goes to a treasurer who joined the association 15 years ago in a special election, and special she is. Even as a novice treasurer, she got involved with volunteered in a variety of roles. Little did she know that her well-earned reputation as a problem solver would lead her to be my very first call when a newly appointed treasurer was struggling. She commuted several days a week for many weeks, over an hour each way in order to support this fellow treasurer. When the interim treasurer decided not to seek office, this treasurer remained committed to the transition of the newly elected treasurer, continuing to commute and traveling. So at this particular, and I unquote, at this particular time, I want you to join me in congratulating and presenting to Mrs. Dickson this Presidential Award of plaque, which reads, let me come down here. Which reads, President's Award presented to Bonnie J. Dickson in appreciation and recognition of her leadership and years of dedication service to the Treasurers Association of Virginia. From the Treasurers Association of Virginia, June 22, 2021, presented by Carla Della Pava, TAV, President 2019 to 2021.
Victory speech.
I bawled that night. I'm not doing it again. Ms. Dixon, let me say this to you. Yes, sir.
Thank you for your department's work and for what you're doing in leading this department. And thank you for representing Lancaster County very, very well. All right, and Ms. Lee, thank you. All right, okay. Mr. Carter?
Fairly, I apologize. I had one other issue. I just wanted to update you quickly on the Triway Trails. As you know, that under the MOU, we have a work committee that's working on behalf of the county. And you all will be the eighth, you know, we're working on your behalf to try to get this done.
Yes.
And as we know, the trail is a trail that we're looking to connect Kilmarnock, Irvington, and Whitestone together with the idea that will nourish the existing businesses in the counties. We'll build upon what the Tides Inn's doing, the Pattersons are doing, what's going on in the community to try to make this community more economically viable and improve the health of the community. I just wanted to let you know that we've raised $175,000 in planning grants. We haven't been to you for any money. We're trying to do it we're trying to see how far we can get on our own. We've hired Bay Design to do the local work. We want to shop local, so they're doing things like wetland delineations, helping us with survey and that type of thing. And just this week, we hired a national consultant. The end game here is to get to the federal funding under the Rails to Trail program and other programs to fund this trail. And so we've now hired a firm out of Charlottesville called Land Planning Design Associates, who do a lot of work in this field. They've worked a lot in the area. They worked on the town park in Kilmarnock, for example. They worked with Gloucester. And they've got a big national presence, but they've done a lot of work in the state. So I just wanted to let you know we're working ahead on that, and we'll keep you abreast of what's going on, because we're working on under your umbrella, and I just wanted to keep you abreast of what's going on.
Thank you for the update.
Thank you, sir.
All right. And thank you for being such a willing participant to help Lancaster County.
Thanks.
Yep. Okay, Mr. Lee.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, tonight we have a resolution before us that we need to adopt in the honor. We're going to honor Mr. Wardell and Mozell Carter and present this resolution on plaque to his family. So I would like to make a motion. I'm going to read this and make a motion that we adopt this resolution.
All right.
And it reads as follows. Whereas Wardell and Mozell Carter were native sons of Lancaster County, born on December the 25th, 1952, and attended Brookvale Elementary and High School, and graduated from Lancaster High School in 1971. And
whereas Wardell and Mozell Carter were honor students and excelled in sports, including being members of the 1969 Brookvale High School Fighting Warriors basketball team that won the state basketball championship, baseball championship, and
whereas Wardell and Mozell Carter attended Virginia State College, pursuing studies in physical education, and returned home to Lancaster County to coach, tutor, and mentor others to help our youth achieve their dreams. And
whereas Wardell and Mozell Carter gave freely of their time to coach, tutor, and mentor youth at the Boys and Girls Club of the Northern Neck, the Northern Neck YMCA, the Lancaster County Little League, and Lancaster County Public Schools. And
whereas Wardell Carter created, developed, and coordinated new and existing recreation programs, first as the director of Lancaster County Parks and Recreation Department from 1989 through 1993, and later for the Westmoreland and King William Counties Parks and Recreation Department, and coached the Northumberland High School baseball and football teams to a regional championship, and was inducted into the Northern Neck Sports Wall Hall of Fame in 2003. And
whereas Wardell and Mozell Carter were born into this world together, spent their lives together helping others, and left this world together on July 23rd, 2021. Their memory will live forever, as evidenced by the numerous tributes posted on signs throughout the county.
Now, therefore be it resolved that the Board of Supervisors of Lancaster County hereby recognizes Wardell and Mozell Carter never-ending dedication to helping the youth of Lancaster County, and honors their memory and accomplishments for lives well lived. Adopted this 26th day of August, 2021.
I move that we adopt this resolution. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay, none. Would the Carter family please come forward for the presentation?
These two gentlemen are Wardell and Mozell Carter brothers. And I just want to say thank you for allowing the county to use Mozell and Wardell. Y'all loaned them to us for a number of years, and they were two humble people. I tell you, they was quiet. They just went about their business. You know, whatever you asked them to do, they willingly did it. They never wanted any recognition or anything like that. And it was an honor for me, I tell you that, to know them, to work with them, and to play sports with them. You know, we played a lot of sports, and Wardell was always the coach. But he never got mad or anything like that. You know, we lost a few games, we won some, but he never got upset. He just kept right on coaching. And it was just an honor to know him, and I really appreciate him. And I appreciate, you know, the whole family for loaning them to us. That's why I used. Y'all loaned them to the community, and they was a great asset to the community. And we have a plaque for each one of you and all the siblings. I think Mr. Gill has the remaining plaque. So Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Y'all want to say anything? Okay. All right.
Mr. Wardell Carter is responsible for my daughters knowing how to swim. We were having our daughters to go visit their aunts for a while and take classes for swimming, and then one summer, we took them to Newport News ourselves each week for swimming. Then I talked to Mr. Carter, says, look, we need somewhere for youth to learn how to swim. And within a couple of weeks, he had it up and going. So that's where my girls learn how to swim, and they know how to swim. One of them is a lifeguard, certified lifeguard. So, okay, those men did a lot for this county, and not only this county, other counties, Northumberland, Westmoreland, some other areas, Richmond County. And so, you know, I was sort of, I don't want to run on. So all right, I got it. All right, those men meant a lot to us. Okay, Broadband Authority update, Mr. Silverman, here?
No, I don't see Gary in the audience. You've got a written report. It's also been on the agenda online, so I think you can probably just move on.
All right, Northern Neck Planning District Commission, Mr. Davis, Jerry Davis, come forward. Now, Mr. Davis, we have requested that he come to us and present to the board some things about what his office is doing and so on. So, Mr. Davis, I know you can talk to us for about an hour or two, but I'm gonna give you about 15 minutes, okay, sir?
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, Don asked me how much time I needed to talk about the planning district. I told him I could do a couple hours.
Yeah.
But we negotiated down to 15 minutes.
All right, all right.
I have with me Lisa Hall, who's with the planning district as well, and Lisa works with economic development, some of our economic development programs, and primarily tourism. She's gonna speak here in a minute, but I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that Supervisor Jason Bellows is the current chairman of the planning district, and Jason's doing a great job, and we're really thankful for his leadership there with the commission. As you all know, the planning district commissions were established in 1969 by the General Assembly when they adopted the Regional Cooperation Act. And the Regional Cooperation Act, it encourages and promotes regional cooperation among the planning district members. And there are 21 planning districts in Virginia, and our member localities, as you know, are Westmoreland County, Northumberland County, Lancaster County, and Richmond County. And each county appoints 4 commission members, so we have a 16-member commission, and from that we have a 4-member executive committee that pretty much deals with budget details, personnel, which, and again, Jason's current chairman. So every year, the executive committee does a number of things. One, they review the financial statement from the previous year. I present for consideration a work plan for the next fiscal year. The work plan sort of comes together. We look at what responsibilities we have from our state and federal partners, what we're being asked to do by the counties and the towns, and that all sort of comes together in a work plan which is presented to the executive committee for their consideration and adoption. And along with that is our budgets, and that's the fiscal plan that we're requesting that is needed to accomplish the work plan for that fiscal year. The annual budget for the planning district for some years has been around $1 million a year. The current budget took a big increase because of the VDOT broadband money that's coming through the planning district this year, but generally, it runs around $1 million a year. And on average, 75% or more of the budget comes from state and federal sources. So the very small percentage, 25% or less, come from a variety of local sources. And I'll just point out that when the commission was established in 1969 by the counties, they established an annual membership contribution to support the commission of $4,500 each. They decided to share that equally among the 4 counties, even though there were population differences. But here, 52 years later, the annual contribution remains at $4,500. So that's never been increased. And the support of the planning district, by and large, comes from the programs that we perform on behalf of the state and federal government. We do a lot of grant writing and grant administration in the planning district and on behalf of the counties. So we have that grant administration funding that comes in. So that's really how we're supported and financially supported, and we're proud of that we don't have to come to the counties and ask for a large share of the local support. So that's as far as the budget goes. In the year, it was 2000, and actually a year probably leading up to 2000, the planning district was designated an economic development district by the U.S. Department of Commerce, the Economic Development Administration. We're one of 10 planning districts in Virginia that are designated as economic development districts. And what that means is that designation came to the region because of the region's economic indicators at the time, primarily unemployment rate, per capita income, that kind of thing, in relation to the national unemployment rate and income. So it was because of that the planning district was designated an economic development district, and we still maintain that designation today. And for that, we do receive some direct funding from EDA to underwrite our economic development activity. And one of the things we're required to do, among a lot of things, but one of the primary things that we're required to do as an economic development district is to maintain a regional comprehensive economic development strategy. And then we review and update that on an annual basis, and are required every 5 years to do a very comprehensive review. And our last SEDS update was about 2.5 years ago, but earlier, well, actually late last year or the middle of last year, all of the economic development districts across the country were asked to update their SEDS documents to reflect what was happening with the pandemic and the economic impact that was having on localities and regions across the country. So we did begin that process to update the SEDS, looking at the impact that the pandemic was having on the region. And in addition, they asked us to incorporate in the SEDS document an economic recovery plan and an economic resiliency plan. So that effort is ongoing. We received some dedicated funding out of the CARES Act to underwrite that effort, and that is currently going on. We retained consulting firm, Grella Partnership Strategies, to assist us with that. Grella, the Grella is owned by Mike Grella, who is a former economic development director for Amazon, and he has his own consulting business now. And he has a number of his associates that live and practice down here in Virginia. Mike works out of New York. But we employed Grella to help us with the SEDS update. And at the same time, we went out for another study, which is a workforce development training study that we're working in partnership with Rappahannock Community College, the Workforce Development Board, and under the guidance of Dr. Megan Healy, who is the governor's workforce training czar as a cabinet level position. And before we determined that we should undertake this kind of an effort, we received guidance from Dr. Healy, and she also brought some funding to the table to help underwrite that effort that came down through from the Department of Labor through the Workforce Development Board. So those RFPs went out at the same time, and Grella Partnership Strategies was selected for both of those studies. And in recognition, not only are they qualified to do both studies, highly qualified, because we had a lot of interest in both studies from consulting firms, but because there's so much overlap and coordination that needs to occur between when you're looking at economic development planning and workforce development planning, the selection committees thought it was important that those two study efforts work very closely together to make sure they complemented each other in the end. So those are underway. Both of them will wrap up here later this calendar year, and we're looking for good things to come out of those studies. The current SEDS document, and we anticipate it'll be the same situation with the updated documents. The three of the main strategies that are in the regional plan that the region should focus on, and it doesn't. This also, it's not only our regional plan, but the Region 6. The Region 6 Economic Development Plan, the state's Economic Development Plan, the Virginia Economic Development Partnership Economic Development Plan, the state commerce. They all have the same three major strategies identified as something that needs to be addressed. And those are workforce training, the sites and building situation at the local level, regional level, and throughout the state. And I say sites and buildings, the way I should say it is the lack of sites and buildings throughout the state. And that's certainly the case in the Northern Neck, not having enough sites and buildings that would accommodate business and industry commerce locating into the region. But that's an issue everywhere, even across the country. So that's an area. And then of course the third one being broadband, and fortunately it looks like we're on our way to addressing that issue in a big way. So we'll talk about that a little later. So the planning district, as a planning district, as an economic development district, a lot of what we do in working with the counties is focused on economic development initiatives, and we try to bring in other grants, and whether it be Go Virginia or EDA or programs that come down through various state agencies, and from the federal government, USDA, the rural business programs. We tap all those resources to address economic development needs on behalf of the counties and localities to address these issues and other issues that exist in the region. I will also point out that we are recognized primarily through the Chesapeake Bay Region Partnership, which is an umbrella organization under the Planning District. We are recognized by the state and by the Virginia Economic Development Partnership as the regional economic development organization. So we work very closely with the Virginia Economic Development Partnership when they're doing, they have prospects that are looking for locations that the Northern Neck may have sites, and we work with them to identify those sites and get that, and also participate in their statewide efforts and speak on behalf of the Northern Neck region. So that's going on as well. And I do want to point out one study effort that happened here it was a couple years ago, and it was underwritten by Go Virginia monies, and it was dedicated to looking at sites, buildings, infrastructure issues in the region, and we were able to get a grant to look at those and study those kind of issues, and we were able to do at least one project in every locality, and we left it up to the locality to identify that project. So every project was different in each locality, but it was all done with this regional grant that came through the planning district, looking specifically at site and building issues, infrastructure issues, to support various economic sites and building issues throughout the region. I know the project in Lancaster County was did some investigation, some study, preliminary engineering, environmental investigation at your 2 school sites, looking to the future if you ever build a new school, to give the county the information on how you could adapt and reuse those buildings as possible commerce sites, or really for any purpose that you deem important at the time. But it gave the county some needed information to help you in that decision process when you get to that point. So I think we can go probably to this slide here. So another thing we do, and we do a lot of this, is on behalf of all the counties and towns throughout the region, is we do a lot of community development block grant work. And been doing that for many years and have a lot of open projects right now. Those can be housing-related projects. I have one minute, okay. All right, those can be housing projects, or we've been doing a lot of these business district revitalization projects, and we're getting ready to do one next week. We're gonna kick one off in the town of Whitestone. So we've been doing a lot of work and working with Whitestone on housing projects that have been funded by CDBG and the business district. So just wanna make that point. We can go to the broadband slide. So here, actually back on July 8th, we heard that the region was a couple of VDOT, Virginia Telecommunication Initiative grants were funded to the region, and that has evolved into a partnership with Dominion Energy, Northern Neck Electric Co-op, the counties, 6 counties are involved, the planning district, All Points Broadband as the private service provider, and working on a very large broadband initiative that probably total investment is $50–60 million that is going to be working towards providing universal broadband coverage throughout the 6-county region. So we're all very excited about that, and I don't have to tell you all how important broadband is for so many reasons. You can go to the next slide. The other thing, the planning district, we're also recognized as the rural transportation organization. We work very closely with VDOT. We do maintain a regional transportation plan on behalf of the region, and we advocate on behalf of the localities through the various VDOT initiatives. Most recently, I just wanted to show here, we received a letter from Stephen, I don't know if they pronounce that Bright or Rich, the commissioner, this VDOT commissioner, that we had, on behalf of a number of stakeholders in the region about the condition of Norris Bridge, and we received some very positive news on behalf of the commissioner that the state of Virginia had placed the Norris Bridge project in a special funding category, and it's 25 special structures in Virginia that have been identified as needing improvement, and the Norris Bridge made that list, and that puts the bridge in a position where, as funding becomes available, and it could be some of this money that's coming down through these various congressional bills that are being discussed or have already passed, it would place the Norris Bridge project in a very high priority position. We can go to the next slide. We also work, we're one of
Hold on, man. Since we asked him, I'm allowing him to go ahead and finish, but speed it up. I'm gonna be respectful with that.
You want me to wrap up, or?
Yes, please. All right, and then we'll ask you some questions at the end. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so we're one of 8 planning districts that participate in the Virginia Coastal Zone Program, dealing with a variety of environmental issues, certainly being a peninsula, and the number of miles of coastline we have in the region is very important to address that. The Virginia Coastal Program works very closely with NOAA at the federal level, and the program is housed in Virginia under Department of Environmental Quality. We can go on to the next slide. And we also work through the Chesapeake Bay Public Access Authority on public access issues throughout the region. One that I do want to point out, the General Assembly put some money in the state budget that goes to the Virginia Port Authority. It's a new program where localities can go, and it's grant money. Hopefully it'll grow over time to address dredging issues that you may have. So we just received a grant from the Virginia Port Authority to update our regional shallow draft navigation plan, which will update the plan that was done years ago, that will look at all the creeks in the northern neck, prioritize them as to dredging needs, and that'll provide the basis to go back and get funding from this Port Authority program to actually accomplish the dredging project. I won't spend much time on this. We're also do a lot of housing work, and we just received a grant from Virginia Housing to do a housing initiative addressing affordable housing in the region. That was a $1 million grant. You're aware of the Emergency Ambulance Revenue Board, that we do the ambulance billing on behalf of the county. You can go on to the next slide. And we also working, we've set up a regional Chesapeake Bay Region Cigarette Tax Board to assist the counties with collecting their cigarette tax revenues. That's 8 localities. We also coordinate the Assign a Highway program, working with the probationers at the regional jail and doing litter cleanup throughout the region. And I think that's pretty much it. Lisa's here if you want to hear from her. Talk about tourism. Certainly tourism is an important industry sector, so it's your call if you want to.
Okay, Mr. Davis, thank you very much for your presentation. We made a mistake. We asked you to come here and we gave you a broad topic. And no, you could comment for a whole afternoon on that. There's a lot of information. There's some specific things I think this board would basically interested in, and they may ask some of those questions now. Dr.
Yes,
Westbrook?
sir. The motion, I believe it was in April, the April meeting, was for you to come and tell us specifically what you're doing for Lancaster County. We realize your broad spectrum of duties, but I would personally, not tonight, But I would personally like to know, these things that you've mentioned, is there anything in Lancaster County that you're talking about? Now, you mentioned Whitestone. Okay, I get that. But these other things are just kind of broad spectrum things that are part of your responsibility, and I appreciate that. But I personally wanted to know what you're doing for us, not what you're charged with doing for the region, but what you're doing for us. So maybe another visit.
Yeah, the short answer is every one of these programs, Lancaster County is part of it and receives benefit from it. So that would be the short answer.
Well, that's a very short answer, but I went to, you may recall, I went to, I believe, 2 meetings of the Public Access Authority at the Warsaw office, at your office. You may not remember that. That was 2018. And Bill Pennell and one of the representatives from Lancaster County.
And Washington?
Yes, the lawyer, yes. Yeah. And I would like to know what has come about from that, because the time that I went, there wasn't any resolution for Lancaster County. That wasn't unusual. I'm not trying to cherry pick here, but if there was something like that, because of this Public Access Authority and the representatives from Lancaster County, you successfully found this property to be used for this purpose. Something like that, just as an example, would be very helpful, I think, for us to really see the value. I don't mean that doesn't sound right. I don't mean to cast aspersions, but really see what you're doing for us.
Right.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments? All right, thank you, Mr.
Chairman?
Yes, one more, okay.
I would like to hear a little bit from Lisa. Lisa, to have her mention about the water trails, because there's a lot of really good things with tourism that have taken place, and I think it would be good for this board to hear it and for the public to hear it.
What is that, the water?
Lisa, with some of the things that she's been working on, I'd like to hear her
Oh,
at least mention,
okay.
have a few minutes to mention a few of the things that, especially the water trails, because that's a really cool
Water
thing.
trails, okay. Ms. Hutton, Ms. Hall? Oh,
Yeah.
hold on a minute. just a
That's
minute.
okay. You can answer it from there. It's fine. You're right better in the microphone, yeah. Under environmental, we had a presentation a while back on this Resilience Adaptation Feasibility Tool, acronym RAFT. Now, in a prior life, I had some experience with these kinds of things, and I became quite jaded, because these so-called tools, the way I saw them coming about is that you've got some smart people out there that are pretty well educated that sit down and they say, well, the first thing we got to come up with is a name that gives us a catchy acronym. Then we'll figure out how we're going to make that tool do something for somebody. Because with the catchy acronym, we can sell it. When they made that presentation, that was exactly the impression I had there. I didn't hear anything that told me that that particular tool was going to make our life any easier or your life any easier. And the concern I have is that, again, in my experience, and the reason that I became jaded about it was that they require a lot of care and feeding, and for which you get hardly anything out at the end of the day. A lot of care and feeding because the people that come in and are going to so-called implement this tool know nothing about the particulars of the PDC, or more to the point, what our Planning and Land Use Administrator is dealing with down here. So my question for you and my comment is that I hope that this is a useful tool. And I hope you're not having it shoved down your throat. And I hope we're not paying money, or a lot of money, for something because that I, unless I'm seriously wrong, believe we're not going to get much out.
Yeah, just real briefly, we were approached by those there's a number of universities that are involved in that, and we were approached by the team that initiated that program. They had the time we were approached, they were finishing up the raft exercise in the Eastern Shore, and they asked if the Northern Neck would be open to them doing the exercise in the Northern Neck region, and that they would identify their own funding. They would bring their own funding to underwrite the effort. So it didn't cost anything to the localities or the planning district or anything. It's just the participation in the exercise. So I think they went and they received a grant from Jesse Ball DuPont to
Okay, so that's the
underwrite that effort.
cost. That's the cost.
It-
But you
yeah,
said
it is
they
a
came into
cost.
the Northern Neck.
Right.
What kind of demands are being put on staff time to feed them the information they need to, utilize this tool?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, yeah, there's an investment through staff time that went into the exercise, no doubt about it.
So, Mr. Gill, is there staff time, has there been staff time expended on this?
I know that Brian may have gone and attended a meeting or two, and Chief Smith attended some meetings, but other than that, and Mr. Bellows. So that's the extent of it to this
Is your
point.
impression that it was something that was worthwhile?
I would defer, because I didn't attend any of those meetings, so I would have to defer to those who went to
Mr. Barnes?
to comment on that.
Be honest now.
Oh, you know me, I'll be brutally honest. I'll be honest with you, gentlemen, and many of you are in the office quite a bit. There are a lot of days in the last 18 months, and Don can tell you, I come in and I stand in place, and all I do is, it's one customer after another. There's very little time for anything other than the business of issuing permits and regulating the ordinances of the county right now. That's because it's extraordinarily busy during an emergency time. I have only been able to participate in a couple of RAFT meetings. The RAFT, I think, is aiming at flood resilience, especially in coastal areas, which is a very needed thing and a very noble pursuit. However, like you heard with solar, and you guys know, I will also ding the county, state government every chance I get, and I'm gonna do that now. Just like solar was rolled out first, and then the state government got their agencies together to try to educate staff, to which I've also said thanks, but no thanks, we've already got it figured out. The same thing is happening with a lot of flood resilience. It's already been on the ground. You did it. Pat Frere in the late 90s did it. It's a known, this county, I think, has always been on the leading edge of dealing with flood issues and sea level rise, climate change. But the help we need is from the legislature to come down and sit with us in the cockpit and know what it's like to fly in a firefight, and then help create legislation to help us. Sadly, a lot of these efforts are kind of trying to reinvent the wheel. So I just have not, honestly, I'd love to have time to help with it. But we're in a situation right now, and you hear this nationwide, but especially here in our county, where we are so busy with permits on a daily basis. There's just no extra time right now for such an effort.
Bottom line, are people extremely busy on this thing?
Ms. Hull?
Extremely busy. They don't need this extra stuff if it's not
Come on
doing
up.
us anything.
I just have a quick bit on.
Ms. Hull, come to the mic.
If I could just sorry, on the RAFT a little bit. The RAFT also turned, to the interests of this body particularly, the RAFT turned into more of an economic resiliency as well as environmental, and those are the meetings that I attended, and those ended up being very useful. And what did come out of it is a professor from ODU has come up with a small business resiliency toolkit. But what it is it's a series of self-survey questions that businesses can use, and they cover a variety of small business issues that are very relevant to the local area. Everything in terms of what do you do in an emergency. It's not just what you do if the office floods or there's a hurricane or you lose power, what sort of redundancy, what systems are in place to back it up. And additionally, what do you do with bigger pictures, business succession, long-term family businesses, how do you deal with that? And it takes folks through that. So there are nuggets that have come out of the RAFT by having all these brains in one place. And when you ask them questions, we need help with this. They have the professors at the ready to put to bear and to roll out these things. So that's being rolled out now through the Chambers of Commerce and through the larger RAFT community. So I think that is one thing that has come out of it that you wouldn't have expected. but that I think will be useful to the business community here in Lancaster County in the Northern
Thank you.
Neck.
We can end it here, but just send me an email and
Sure, I'll
define
send you a link.
economic resilience and environmental resilience for me, so I even know what it is.
Okay,
Thank you.
very good. Anything else, or?
You want to hit
Water trails.
Tourism, okay, we're on to tourism. Okay, since I was here in person with you all quite, it seems like some years ago, in June of 2020, this document was released. This is the Northern Neck Heritage Area, National Heritage Area Feasibility Study. And it was, what, Jerry, 11 years in the making with the National Park Service. So we finally have a study. It's available, a link online, but I just wanted to bring a copy with you that it's here. It's a beautiful document, very well done, recommending designation. A year later, at the end of June, a bicameral, bipartisan legislation was introduced. You probably are aware, designating to designate the Northern Neck as a National Heritage Area. The progress is that it's in committee. I don't know how long it'll be there, but anyway, it's been introduced in Congress and it'll be in committee. So that is the progress on the heritage area. Regarding water trails, Mr. Bellows asked about water trails. The water trails is a 4 PDC project to brand the entire coastal region's water trails similarly so people can have a paddling experience from one area to the other and still have the same sort of mapping and interface on the phone and interpretation and services. So between the Northern Neck, Middle Peninsula, Eastern Shore, and the Chickahominy area, can you provide sort of a universal paddling experience to encourage people to go to all of those regions and experience the waterways. So the Water Trails little bumper sticker is what we're doing to try to promote that website, Virginia Water Trails. So that is, and that's also part of our DEQ work with ecotourism. So that doesn't really come out of tourism, but it definitely has a huge tourism impact. Are there any other questions for me?
Gentlemen? No.
Okay, thank you all very much.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Thank you, Mr. Davis. All right, okay. All right, moving along. Application for changing of zoning district classification. Mr. Barnes?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This application is for a change of zoning district classification from R1 residential general to C1 commercial conditional by Malcolm Ransone for a 12-acre parcel known as tax map number 2827. This is located off of Route 200 Irvington Road on the corner of White Pine Drive. If you go to the Kilmarnock dump site, turn right on, that's White Pine Drive. This property is to your left and also features the current office of Ransone's Nursery and Chesapeake Tree Service. This applicant came to county staff several times in the last year or so with wanting to relocate the office, wanting to change some things on the site. As you see staff indicate in your memo, this is technically a prior non-conforming use because it was an R1 parcel right off the bat in the 70s, even though it was being operated by Mr. Ransone as early as 1972. The use continued. In discussing things with them, you'd either have to go get a special exception. It's just a whole lot cleaner to upzone the property to C1, which would match its effective use and the way it's been used for quite some time. The main reason for this is to locate the office. Mr. Ransone is here and can answer further questions on his reasoning or whatever. This was heard by the Planning Commission on July 15th. As you'll see in the packet submittal, the applicant has conditioned his request. And what I will do real quick for the record is list, it's easier to list the uses that he left because he has struck all of the permitted uses of C1 except for just a couple, and I'll read those very quickly. 8-1-12, office buildings, business offices, and banks he would like to keep. That, as he indicates, is his desired use. Possible use 8-1-23 for our purposes here, it's either a use or it's struck. It's either conditioned or it's, so that would remain 8-1-26, retail wholesale processing activities not objectionable because of dust, noise, or odors. They do sell plants and trees. Machinery sales and service, welding, machine shops. And 8-1-34, horticultural nurseries and greenhouses and garden supplies. There's one other use that the applicant struck that you saw in the minutes from the Planning Commission that we indicated that needed to stay, and that's Article 8-1-28. That's county sanctioned public uses. County sanctioned public uses are in all of our districts except for R2. Of course, R2 is a repealed district anyway, but it's generally preferred if we keep 8-1-28. Mr. Ransone at the Planning Commission meeting agreed to that verbally, and he's here, and I think he can affirm that. And it might be probably prudent, and I'm sure Mr. Cornwell would agree with me, if you all in your motion move that 8-1-28 be included as a permitted use and not be a conditioned strike with this request, and make sure that Mr. Ransone agrees to that. Other than that, I'll entertain any questions you may have about the process. I've received no protests or public comments on this application.
Any questions before I open this up for public comment, or public hearing? None? Okay, haven't heard none from you. Now, the floor is now open for public comment concerning this. We have any online? Okay, public hearing is now closed. All right, do I entertain a motion or discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that this request be made to rezone this property to C1 with the addition of, what was the 8-1-28?
28. Yes, sir.
28.
8-1-28.
28.
Okay, you've heard the motion. Are you ready for the vote? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it, unanimous. Okay, thank you.
Move for approval of the consensus docket.
All right, you've heard that motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, unanimous vote. All right, salaries and invoices.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the August expenditures and the following amounts. Total invoices, $968,750.67. Total payroll, $324,625.89 for a total of $1,293,376.56, of which capital improvements were $509,473.29, and CARES Act expenditures are $57.74.
Okay, you've heard the report here in the form of a motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous vote. Okay, next one is fiscal year 2022 budget supplemental appropriations for the Virginia Cooperative Extension Service to be reinstated. Mrs. Brent, Tara Brent.
Good evening. I am here, I had presented to Administrator Gill that the state and Virginia Cooperative Extension has reinstated our 50% of the budget funding for the Family and Consumer Sciences Extension Agent position. That position has been vacant since the fall of 2014. And in May of 2018, this board took the money out of our appropriation because the state was not funding that position at that point. Since the state has put the funds up for that position, as well as Northumberland County, who also assists with the funding for this position, I am here to request that appropriation be reinstated, and that amount is $11,000.
Okay, gentlemen, you have heard the request. Yes, sir.
Have you advertised for somebody to fill that position yet?
No, Virginia Cooperative Extension will not advertise it until they're assured that all funding sources are there for the position.
So you're not really asking for a supplemental, because I'm guessing that you're only about 25%, if that, expended by now. What you're asking for is you're asking for a modification to the budget, to put it back into the budget.
Yes, yes, sir.
And you're doing that because the state says they won't advertise it until we do that. Is that basically correct?
Yes, they would, so the position, traditionally, the funding for the position was 50% from the state, 25% from Lancaster County, and 25% from Northumberland County. So they wanted assurance from me that both Northumberland and Lancaster County had the funds in our budget to pay for that position.
Mr. Chairman, as I've indicated before, I have a real problem with supplementals or requests for funds coming in, you know, in the first 2 months of the fiscal year, because you've got 10 months left to execute. And this particular cost administrator has always under-executed. Their budget, whatever it is, they spent less than that. Now, that's not a criticism, that's just an observation. And it troubles me greatly that the state says, well, you have to take and come forth with this money, or we're not going to advertise for it, because that's not what it's all about to me. You know, I want to see that, but here it is, the state's coming in on this thing, and if they didn't, it would be my position, I would say, fine, let's wait until you advertise, hire the person, and see how you're executing your budget. We have a mid-year review where we look at these kind of things, where we could give her a supplemental then. But to me, the only time we should be given a supplemental is at the mid-year review. Now, how do we reconcile it with the state requirement that they've got? Personally, I would like to see it looked into a little bit more depth and somehow or another, if we can, explain to the state that this is not the way we like to do business. That there's adequate money in the budget right now if that person came on board tomorrow.
Yeah, and you can't hire. Are you intending to fill that position? I'm thinking.
I do not, Virginia Tech Human Resources is the one that would post and go through the initial review of candidates. And then locally, myself, as well as a representative from each county, would be able to participate in the interview process to hire for the position.
You're right, you're right.
Can't you just tell the state right now that you have money in your budget to fund this position? Because you do.
Well, our appropriation right now is $34,100. $29,000 of that is paying for the salary of people that we already have.
So you're saying that at the end of the year, 29,000 plus say another 5,000, at the end of the year, you're going to fully execute your budget. Is that a fair statement?
That, I find that to be pretty accurate.
Well,
You
isn't there a
say that
difference?
you believe that to be true.
A difference between amending the budget and appropriating the money? Can't we amend the budget and not appropriate it until they hire somebody?
Yeah, I think you could amend the budget and then make the appropriation later if needed.
I mean, the budget's just a guideline. It doesn't transfer any money anywhere. The appropriation is where you give the money. There's no reason to give them half this salary right now, just the approval to say we would fund it if they need the money,
And all
which
they
is what
need-
the budget would do.
And all they need to know is that the money's in the budget, right, for it. Well,
Yes.
I'm up for that.
Because then when they actually hire the person, they can come back and say, okay, we need the money appropriated because we have the person on board and we're going to need, maybe there is some extra money at that point. They can say that they've only hired that person in January, and so
Correct.
there may only be a couple of months left in the fiscal year, to Mr. Larson's comment, and they may be able to fund the rest of it out of their budget, who knows? But that would come at an appropriation moment, not just the budget, which is just a piece of paper that's a guideline.
Well, I'd move that we amend the budget for $11,000. All right, heard the motion, any comments on it?
To include the 11,000.
To include, yeah.
Yeah, not amended, so that's the
No,
total.
no.
I'm just checking.
Okay, yeah. All right, you've heard the motion, all in favor of that, say aye. Aye. All right, unanimous vote. All right, ma'am,
Thank you.
okay. Okay, board reports. Or have I skipped anything? No, that's it, board reports. Gentlemen, y'all have anything to report?
I don't really have a report, I just have a couple of comments and questions for the county administrator. Where are we on dump paving of the Irvington refuse site?
It started, that they moved in today or yesterday.
Okay, 'cause I was just down there and I was like, when are they ever gonna do this
Yeah,
job?
C.W. Davis. Well, they let Donald know on Monday that they would be here in 1 or 2 days. So, I think they moved in
I
yesterday.
know there was a question with VDOT maybe doing something with that flooding or the culvert that wasn't part of this. Have we gotten anywhere on that?
No, not yet. We'll look into that since C.W. Davis has moved in. We'll get that straight.
They're gonna be, a different traffic design down there too, because I was talking to Don about it the other day, so.
Yeah.
Doing the pavement, you know, they're gonna rewrite traffic, so.
Yeah.
So it won't stop people coming in, it might slow them down a little bit, but it won't stop them from coming in.
No, it's not closed. It's going to remain open during the paving. You know, we had a plan A. If C.W. Davis moved in early enough, we're probably going to use the middle school parking lot to set some roll-offs there. But now that school has started, that's out of play. So the plan now, Plan B, is to work on half of the refuge site at a time and still allow the public to come in. So it will be open, but you may have some congestion. And,
Can we get some messaging out to the public on that?
yeah, we'll definitely, we can put it on the, yeah.
And put it on the website and stuff, because that's a major site and that's gonna cause a traffic problem.
Yeah, we can do that.
I mean, we got traffic problems down in anyhow,
Yeah.
you know, so.
The second thing is another project. Where are we on the continuing of the painting of this building? We're in the roof.
The roof has not gone out to bid at this point. The painting is halfway done. The soffit was completed, and the contractor who was hired to do the cupola has been reluctant to finish the job, so we may have to get another contractor to finish the job.
Well, we need an answer of where we're at by next month. Otherwise, we need to get another contractor on board because it looks really bad.
Yeah.
it's
And
been
we
about
can't let
2
this keep
years.
dragging on.
Yeah.
That was the same answer last month, so.
Do we have anybody named Guido on staff?
No, we don't.
Can we hire somebody?
Also, I'm gonna mention it again, the roof, the slate roof across on the old jail, has that been evaluated or looked at yet?
On the old jail?
Or the old clerk's office?
The old clerk's
excuse me.
office? No. I mean, I'd have to get with Karen Hart on that. I know we mentioned it last month, but
I've mentioned it for 3 months now.
Once we get our new guy on board, we probably move along a lot faster.
yeah, possibly. That it?
That's it, yes.
I just have a question about.
For now.
I have a question about the appointments. We've been advertising those, is that correct? How often have we advertised?
It was twice a year, 6 months.
So the last time was when?
What is this? It's,
Or August now?
yeah, next time should be September.
Okay, so next month.
Mhm.
And what kind of response are we getting?
Very little. I think I had 2 people respond the very first time that I advertised, and maybe 1 the second time.
Well, you know, Mr. Lee and I had a conversation by telephone about using social media to advertise these things. Are we doing that?
No, we do not have a Facebook page, done by the county.
Well, it would seem to me that, I don't know how to do that. I don't do it. But if we could do that, hopefully we'd have more people aware of the openings. 3 of the 4 appointments that are past due are for the Historic Resources Commission. And although they're listed by district, it's not a district thing.
Yeah.
I don't know about the Board of Zoning Appeals, whether that needs to be by district. If so,
That's a court appointment.
I'm remiss.
I'm not sure, but I know that's a court appointment. I think that one may have to be.
You make a recommendation to the circuit judge.
Yeah.
But does the recommendation have to come by district? So they're all 4 open to anybody in the county who would be interested in being named. We just need to let the
What I
people
find a lot of times, I
know.
just have to beat the bushes and ask people, do you know somebody who would serve in this area? And then interview those people and say, would you want to serve?
I understand,
Yeah.
that's what it comes down to,
Yeah.
if nobody's interested.
Yeah.
And I mean, I have my own Board of Supervisors social media page, and I push stuff out and ask for stuff on that occasionally. But the point of the county, if the county was gonna do it, it would have to be basically assigned to a staff, because you can't just have a social media page. It's something you really gotta focus on almost every day and post something every day, or people don't really they don't follow it, or they don't really see it.
Well, one of the things Mr. Lee and I talked about was whether there were churches or civic organizations that have social media sites that they do monitor, and we could just alert them so they could put it out to their audience.
Definitely. I think that's something that could be done.
That's the way I think it's
And
best.
some committees, people don't mind serving on, others, they're not interested in it.
No, I understand,
That's
if they're
what-
not interested, that's fine, it's just,
You have to be careful of these days. I remember one hearing I had in Numberland County where one member of the BCA said, you know why we were there, because you didn't believe in zoning. So if you're there to enforce the zoning ordinance and didn't believe in zoning, it's a little bit of a problem. So you do have to be careful with the BCA.
well,
Chief Smith just emailed me and said that he can handle the Facebook side of this. He can make a county subpage off of their Facebook page, because they've maintained one for years. And so he can help us with that.
good, good. So, am I remiss in not doing something as District 5, or I'm not remiss yet, since,
No, I think we need to go this route right here.
I do
See,
too.
because I got another one, I think it's gonna come open, because I think the guy gonna step off, because he don't like it, so. And I mean, I had a heck of a time getting him in the first place, and now, he said,
yeah,
Not for him.
it's not for him.
okay, well, thank you.
Yeah, I think this is an ongoing problem with volunteerism
Yeah.
and just people being so busy, or it's been increasingly difficult to find people to fill these positions. But mine expired in 2019, and I still have not found anybody.
Yes, sir.
I'm done.
If I may, it's interesting, because I wanted to come to this exact same thing, only perhaps from a little bit different direction. As Dr. Westbrook pointed out, 3 of the 4 on there relate to the Historic Resources Commission. I will tell you that I've made no effort to replace Sharon Gill, because in my experience, this is a commission that rarely met. Now, I realize that there were times that I'm not aware of, but I think that the very fact that we have 3 people, 3 vacancies on there, has to make us ask the question, what are we expecting from them? And what, is it reasonable expectation? Do we have to, because otherwise, why put it up there?
I can answer that, I believe. I was the liaison to that Historic Resources Commission, and my wife was the chairman.
I know, I realize I'm stepping on toes.
Well, you're not stepping on toes. You're asking very good questions, but they were charged with looking at Chapter 10 of the Comprehensive Plan and what they were going to do with that. And the basic, what they arrived at, the conclusion they arrived at was that they don't have any power to enforce things, and they don't have the expertise that used to be there years ago when they first started this. You really need a historical architecture guy or woman or whatever to make decisions. So, and Mr. Lee can correct me because the Planning Commission,
We
as far as
changed some.
Chapter 10 goes, and so yes, they have really very little to do. And that what they do have to do would require some degree of expertise. What they were forced with was trying to come up with the requirements. If you're going to be in a historical district, then you can't do this, this, or this unless you get permission. Well, they didn't want to do that. They weren't going to say you couldn't paint your house this color because back when in 1789 it wasn't that color. So it really kind of died on the vine. because of that. That's not to say it doesn't have some worth, but
Well, do we resurrect it, put new energy in it, get members appointed, and then sit down and figure out what we want them to do? Because we do have a historic district in our zoning ordinance.
I'm looking at the duties that we have here. It says, conduct research, reviews and inspect historic sites, and if approved, gets permission to enter the property on the local register. Review Article 10 of the language that Dr. Westbrook just talked about. Those were the duties.
right.
You know, those are the duties.
Right. But when you really come down to it, it's really, I think if we were to do the reverse of what you said and we decided what we want them to do, and then see if anyone's interested in doing that, that's fine. But
Well, the revision to Article 10 reduced the responsibilities of the HRC.
exactly.
And so, but they still do have some responsibilities. So I think the commission at some point, needs to be filled, and you've got to have willing people to do it. But at some point, it does need to be filled.
But for someone to place their property in the historic registry, there needs to be an incentive. And typically, that's going to be monetary. That's going to be a tax something or other, which of course they don't have the power to do. They have the power to recommend. Because you can't just come at somebody and say, well, if you don't do something. I believe there was one or two properties that were historical properties that were burned or torn down or whatever because the person didn't want that responsibility. I don't know. But I'm just saying, it's not as easy as you would think, that if someone's gonna put their property on a historic registry and be limited in what they can do, you've got to give them something. It's got to make it worth their while.
And right now, there's nothing
There's
there
nothing.
making it worth their
And
while.
someone who has a historic property probably treasures that, cherishes that, and isn't going to do something bizarre with that. So they don't need an incentive. Some of them don't. So anyhow, it just seems like it's words on paper to me. But if somebody wanted to redefine what it is that they should be doing and then advertise for it, I'm all in favor of it. I can just tell you that.
Well, I think the revision to Article 10 was basically a redefining of it.
Yes, but you just mentioned that there's still some duties remaining and
There are.
they're not tenable. It's not like someone's going, to me. So if you think they are, great. I'm not arguing with you.
Yeah, 'cause we just did this revision, about 10 months ago or something
Yeah.
like that. We just did the
That's right.
revision about 10 months ago. And because that was one of the directives, we got that some of this stuff they couldn't enforce. So we
Right.
took a lot of that stuff out and we gave it to somebody on staff.
Well,
here.
to the staff, that's right.
Zoning administrator and building official.
Yeah. No, but that was appropriate, that you could take the steps that were necessary.
Yeah, there is no incentive for someone to place their property in the historic overlay zone. There's only 2 properties in the county that I'm aware of that are currently under that historic overlay zoning. So,
And I think there's a state registry that,
yeah, you can be on the state registry and even the national registry and not be under our historic overlay zoning.
yes,
So-
so theoretically, that property is protected without us.
Right.
Don't those even have more protections?
Don't those-
The federal and state have even more requirements, don't they?
I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I just wanted to bring it up because I thought it was worth doing. I have no recommendations.
Well, again, I think if we're going to have this and we're going to show these as vacancies, I think we have an obligation as a first step to say, okay, what is it that we want you to do? What is the meat of your effort? Because we're also identifying a staff member to act as a liaison. And it gets back to my question for Mr. Davis, and that was, that I sometimes think we get carried away. You know, we're gonna do all this, we're gonna do that, but we don't realize what the impact is on staff time, and for that matter, on our time, you know? We're not spread as thin as they are, but by the same token, you know, we've got these meetings and whatnot we go to. I feel, you know, I think we want to go to them and feel like we're coming out of there with something, some meat. And I just want to say also as a final thing, and then I'll shut my mouth so we can get out of here, but with respect to things that the PDC does, there's one thing that I'm not sure a lot of people are aware of, that the PDC has done for us. It's been a little while now, but the enterprise zones that we have to be renewed regularly. We came very close to not getting our renewal in, and that would have denied some projects here in the county the opportunity to get funding by virtue of being in the enterprise zone. And Mr. Davis put people out there, and I know that Mr. Gill was able, or his folks were able to go up there and sit down with them and get that application in for renewal very quickly. And it would not have happened if the assets hadn't been dedicated by the PDC to do that. So that's just one example of what they have done for us and what they can continue to do.
Don, maybe this is a suggestion for the historical. Maybe you need to come back to Plan Commission. We need to take a look at now. It won't be in time soon because Plan Commission's got, I think Brian can tell you, got a lot of stuff coming up. But maybe we can take another look at those articles and kind of see if we can, you know, tune them up a little bit more or something like that.
Well, I think
change it
that's
bit.
probably a good, probably a good.
Gentlemen, it won't be, you know, it won't be like next month or nothing like that because it's got, you know, got a lot of stuff to deal with. But I think that's probably what ought to happen.
That's a good idea, good idea. But as far as the Board of Zoning Appeals, we're gonna see if Matt can put it on the social media.
Yeah, we can do that.
And the other comes out in September, the next advertisement.
Mm-hmm.
So, cross our fingers.
All right.
Uh-huh.
Any more board concerns, comments? All right, County Administrator.
I got three things real quick. Jimmy Carter alluded to it earlier. The Business Relations Advisory Committee has met several times since you formed that group several months ago. They've gotten to the point where they would like to have a joint work session with the Board of Supervisors. They have thrown out the date of, I believe it's Thursday, September the 9th at 7 p.m. So could you all tell me if that date works for you all?
September the 9th.
Thursday, September the 9th at 7 p.m.
I can't be here then.
Huh?
I cannot be here then.
You can't be here?
Yes. I'm good.
Okay.
What time?
7
On the 9th.
on the 9th.
Okay.
You can make it?
Yep.
All right, so Mr. Lawson cannot make it. Do you want to try for another date or just go with 4 of you?
Hold on.
Well, based on what I saw at the last meetings, on strategic meeting, we don't have a whole lot of dates to play with. You remember?
Yeah.
You know, we it wasn't been on that side, because we threw it like 3 dates.
Yeah.
And it was always like 2 or 3 couldn't make
Right.
it on the committee side.
Yeah, I mean, there'll be some members of the CBRAC committee that can't be there as well.
Yeah.
And we can do this by Zoom as well, so I don't know if that changes anything for you.
I'll have to look at it. I've got another commitment going on, but I could probably do that, yes.
Okay.
I'm available.
You're available? Do you all want to go with that date?
I think so.
All right. So, Jimmy, we'll look at September 9th at 7 p.m. in this room for the joint work session with the Business Relations Advisory Committee. Number 2.
Did you ask Glenn, was it good for him?
Number 2, I don't see Mr. Bott in the audience, but this is mainly for him. There was a CARES expenditure on the salaries and invoices of $57.74. That's the monthly Zoom charge that we have to pay to be able to conduct these electronic meetings. So that was the loan charge. for the CARES money. So the balance now for that CARES account is $590,435.26. I will tell you also the third thing, that you all authorized me to seek the American Rescue Plan Act funding, and I did that, and we received that money on August the 12th of $1,029,754. We will get that exact same amount 1 year later, so it's a two-part funding with that.
Time to go to Disney World.
With that, with that. So very quickly, that's all I have.
All right, gentlemen, y'all have any other things? All right, tonight I entertain an adjournment.
Are we through already?
I entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
All right, all those in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.